Hey there. Before we begin, you should be in a position that is comfortable to you, and you can let us know in the comments where in the world you are and what is the current time for you. On the vast, windswept Eurasian steppe, a young boy named Attila was busy not playing video games because it was the 5th century and the only joystick he knew was attached to a horse. This was the world of the Huns, a society where your social standing was directly proportional to how well you could stay on a galloping steed. Born around 406 AD, Attila grew up in an environment that makes modern-day family squabbles look like a walk in the park. This was a place where geopolitics was less about borders and more about who had the biggest herd of horses and the sharpest swords. Let's dive into the geopolitics of the 5th century. It wasn't a simple game of chess, more like a high-stakes reality show set in muddy fields and smoky tents. The Roman Empire, divided into east and west like some ancient sibling rivalry, was constantly dealing with barbarians at the gates. But these weren't just any barbarians. The Huns were the rock stars of the nomadic world. They didn't bother with castles or cathedrals. They brought their homes with them in the form of portable yurts. They were the original van lifers, minus the Instagram account. The Huns' unique diplomacy was a blend of horse riding, archery, and a touch of menace. They didn't send ambassadors with scrolls of parchment. They sent a cavalry charge to say, "Hello, neighbour." The Huns were master negotiators, often getting hefty tributes from the Romans to, quite literally, stay away. At one point, the Romans were paying £700 of gold each year for peace. That's roughly the weight of a fully grown polar bear in gold coins. Not a bad deal if you can get it. So how did a guy like Attila become a household name? The story is as much about family drama as it is about conquest. Attila had a brother named Bleda, and like any classic sibling duo, their relationship was complicated. They ruled together for a while, which was probably as awkward as sharing a bunk bed with someone you'd rather not. The historical accounts are a bit murky on the details, but by 445 AD, Bleda was out of the picture, leaving Attila as the sole ruler of the Huns. Rumour has it fratricide might have been involved, but hey, it's not like they could just unfollow each other on social media. Attila's rise to power wasn't just about eliminating his brother. It was about unifying a diverse group of nomadic tribes under one banner. These tribes were scattered across the steppe, from present-day Hungary to Russia. Attila had the charisma of a cult leader and the tactical genius of a military strategist. He could rally his troops with speeches that were probably more Braveheart than TED Talk, and he knew how to exploit the political weaknesses of his enemies. When he wasn't busy expanding his empire, he was playing the Romans against each other, switching allegiances faster than a soap opera villain. But let's not romanticize Attila too much. While he was undoubtedly a charismatic leader, his empire was built on warfare and intimidation. The Huns were not known for their architectural achievements or philosophical treatises. They were a force of nature, sweeping across Europe like a storm. Attila himself was described by contemporary historians as a man with a fierce gaze and a demeanour that could make a seasoned warrior squirm. The Byzantine historian Priscus, who actually met Attila, described him as having a broad chest, a large head, and small, deep-set eyes. Basically, he was the kind of guy you wouldn't want to run into in a dark alley. The Hunnic Empire under Attila was a patchwork of different tribes and cultures, held together by his force of will and the promise of plunder. Unlike the Romans, who built roads and aqueducts, the Huns left behind little physical evidence of their reign. Their legacy was written in the fear they instilled and the chaos they wrought. Attila's reign was marked by a series of military campaigns against both the Eastern and Western Roman empires. His most famous incursions were into Gaul and Italy, where he earned the nickname the Scourge of God. The Romans might have called him that with a shudder, but it was a brand that stuck. Now, let's talk about the myth versus the reality of Attila. The legend paints him as a bloodthirsty barbarian, a destroyer of civilizations. In reality, he was a complex figure, more nuanced than the simplistic villain history sometimes makes him out to be. He was a pragmatic leader who understood the intricacies of power and the importance of alliances. His dealings with the Romans were as much about politics as they were about warfare. He knew when to strike and when to negotiate, a skill that kept his empire together and his enemies on edge. Attila's story is a reminder that history is often more complicated than the narratives we create. It's easy to cast him as the villain in the grand theatre of history. but he was also a product of his time, a time when survival depended on being the toughest player on the field. The Huns didn't conquer Europe, but they left an indelible mark on its history. Attila's name became synonymous with fear, a testament to the power of reputation in the ancient world. As we continue this tale of the Hunnic Empire, remember that Attila was as much a master of perception as he was a leader of men. And so, the stage was set for Attila to become one of the most feared names in history. His journey from the Eurasian steppe to the gates of Rome is a saga of ambition, cunning, and a little bit of fratricide. So buckle up. This is just the beginning. Attila's journey to infamy was just beginning, and it was time to delve deeper into the enigmatic blend of charisma and terror that defined his reign. Let's be honest, Attila's leadership style was the kind of paradox that would make a psychologist swoon, charmingly terrifying. Imagine a CEO who could inspire loyalty while making his employees slightly afraid to open their emails, except in this case, the emails were cavalry charges and the employees were tribes of battle-hardened warriors. Attila had a knack for transforming intimidation into an art form, and nowhere was this more evident than in his dealings with the Roman Empire. Picture this: two mighty Roman empires, East and West, both trying to stave off the barbarian hordes while simultaneously dealing with their own internal chaos. Kind of like trying to keep a house party under control when the neighbours have called in the noise complaint. Enter Attila, with his strategic acumen sharper than a Hunnic arrowhead, ready to exploit any and every opportunity that presented itself. One of Attila's most infamous strategic moves came in 435 AD with the Treaty of Margus. This wasn't just any treaty, it was a masterclass in political maneuvering. The Romans, realizing that the Huns weren't going away anytime soon, agreed to pay an annual tribute to keep the peace, a peace that was as delicate as a house of cards in a hurricane. The specifics? The Romans would shell out 700 pounds of gold each year, which, for context, is about as heavy as a vending machine. In return, Attila agreed to play nice, or at least not pillage their cities for a while. It was a business deal that would make even a modern-day tech mogul nod in approval. It's fascinating to consider how Attila's approach to negotiations was less about the actual terms and more about the spectacle, a precursor to the kind of public relations wizardry we see today. He knew that the perception of power was often as important as power itself. His demands weren't just about accruing wealth, they were about sending a message. When you can convince one of the greatest empires in history to pay you off, you're not just leading a tribe, you're running a multinational operation from the saddle of a horse. But let's not get too swept away by the romance of Attila's villainous charm. While his reputation as a fearsome leader was certainly earned, it was also carefully crafted. Attila understood the value of a well-timed threat, and he was adept at turning the screws on the Romans just enough to ensure they remained pliable, but not so much that they united against him. His ransom demands, often likened to the valuations of modern tech startups, were strategic moves designed to keep the Hunnic war machine well-oiled and well-funded. Now here's where Attila's genius really shines. He knew that sometimes the best way to win a battle was not to fight it at all. His interactions with the Romans were a delicate dance of diplomacy and intimidation, a juggling act of promises and threats. He was a medieval spin doctor, crafting a narrative that kept his enemies in a constant state of uncertainty. The fear of what Attila might do was often more effective than the reality of what he actually did. Of course, the legend of Attila as the ultimate barbarian leader, the scourge of God, had its roots in these very dealings. The Romans, masters of documentation and drama, painted him as a figure of almost mythical terror. Yet, beneath the surface, Attila was a pragmatic leader, more interested in strategic gains than senseless destruction. He was a realist, aware that his power rested on his ability to maneuver through the shifting sands of politics and warfare rather than brute force alone. It's easy to imagine Attila in today's world, perhaps as a headline-grabbing CEO or a political strategist, but his true genius lay in his ability to navigate the complexities of his own time. He wasn't just a marauder, he was a statesman of sorts, albeit one who preferred the battlefield to the boardroom. His dealings with the Romans were a testament to his understanding of power dynamics, a lesson in how to leverage fear and reputation to his advantage. As we inch closer to the climax of Attila's story, remember that his legacy is as much about perception as it is about reality. He was a master of his image, using the tools of fear and charisma to carve out an empire that, while it may not have endured in the physical sense, left an indelible mark on history. Attila's story is far from over, and as we continue to unravel the tapestry of his life, we'll see just how deep his understanding of human nature truly went. Stay tuned, because the saga of Attila the Hun is about to get even more intriguing. As Attila's epic saga of diplomacy and dread continued, it was time to crank up the volume and let the Huns' invasion tour across Europe hit its infamous crescendo, the invasion of Gaul in 451 AD. Think of it as Attila's greatest hits album, but with more swords and less airplay. This wasn't just some casual jaunt through the countryside. It was a full-blown military campaign, complete with strategic brilliance, logistical nightmares, and enough drama to fill a Roman amphitheatre. First, let's talk strategy. The Huns weren't marching into Gaul to admire the local vineyards or sample the cheese. Attila had a plan, and it was as ambitious as it was audacious. His forces, numbering anywhere from 30,000 to 60,000 mounted warriors, were like a tidal wave of horseflesh and steel. Attila's tactical genius lay in his ability to coordinate this massive force, ensuring they moved as one fearsome unit. Imagine trying to choreograph a flash mob, but with the fate of empires hanging in the balance. Now, logistics, because feeding a horde of hungry Huns isn't as simple as swinging by the medieval equivalent of a drive-through. Attila's army was a mobile society, and each warrior came with an entourage of family, support staff, and livestock. We're talking thousands of people and animals, all needing food, water, and shelter. It's like organizing a world tour for a rock band, but with more hay bales and fewer electric guitars. For the Huns, the solution lay in their nomadic roots. They were masters of living off the land, expert foragers who could turn a barren field into a buffet. Their horses, the true MVPs of the campaign, were hardy creatures that could graze on the move, providing mobility and sustenance in one shaggy package. As Attila's forces thundered across Gaul, they weren't just pillaging for plunder, they were making a statement. This was a power play on a grand scale, a demonstration of Hunnic dominance designed to rattle even the most stoic Roman senator. But Attila wasn't just flexing his muscles for the sake of it, he was also sending a message to his frenemies, namely Flavius Aetius, the Roman general who was as much a rival as he was an unlikely ally. Flavius Aetius, the guy who probably had "it's complicated" as his relationship status with Attila. Their alliance was one of history's quirkier bromances, born out of necessity rather than mutual admiration. Aetius, a seasoned military leader with a knack for realpolitik, recognized the threat posed by Attila, but also saw an opportunity. By allying with Attila, Aetius could use Hunnic muscle to keep other barbarian tribes in check, a classic case of "the enemy of my enemy is my friend." But like any good sitcom, this friendship had its share of misunderstandings and plot twists. The climax of this awkward alliance came at the Battle of the Catalanian Plains, one of antiquity's most epic showdowns. Picture it. Two enormous armies facing off on the fields of northeastern Gaul like a deadly game of Risk, played out in real life. On one side, Attila's Huns, backed by a coalition of Germanic tribes. On the other, a motley crew of Romans, Visigoths, and assorted allies led by Aetius. It was the kind of battle that inspired poets and chroniclers, a clash of titans with the fate of Western Europe hanging in the balance. Now, time to bust some myths about this legendary encounter. The romanticized version of the battle paints it as a clear victory for the Romans and their allies, a decisive blow against the barbarian hordes. But the reality was far muddier, quite literally. Muddy fields do not make for easy combat. The fighting was brutal and chaotic, a swirling melee of clashing swords and trampling hooves. Both sides suffered heavy casualties, with estimates of the dead ranging from 10,000 to 30,000, depending on which ancient historian you ask and how much poetic license they took. In the end, the battle was more of a stalemate than a sweeping victory. Attila's forces withdrew, but not because they were decisively beaten. It was a strategic retreat, a calculated move in the grand game of war. The Huns had lost many men, but they were far from defeated, and Attila lived to fight another day. For Aetius and his allies, it was a relief to have stopped the Hunnic advance, but they knew the threat was far from over. It was less happily ever after and more to be continued. The reality of Attila's military prowess was that he was neither the invincible conqueror nor the bumbling barbarian some narratives suggest. His genius lay in his adaptability, his ability to strike hard and fast, then melt away like the morning mist. He was a master of psychological warfare, using fear and reputation to unnerve his foes. The romance of the battlefield might have cast him as a marauding villain, but the truth was more nuanced. Attila was a leader who understood the art of war as much as the science of survival. And let's not forget the economic context of this whole affair. War was an expensive business, and Attila's campaigns weren't funded by goodwill alone. The loot and tribute he extracted from conquered territories and appeased empires were crucial to keeping the Hunnic war machine running. It wasn't just about pillaging for the thrill of it, it was about sustaining a vast and diverse empire that relied on constant movement and conquest to thrive. So, as we leave the fields of the Catalonian plains behind, remember that the story of Attila the Hun is one of paradox and complexity. He was a leader who defied easy categorization, a figure who loomed large in the imaginations of his contemporaries and in the annals of history. The invasion of Gaul was just one chapter in his tumultuous tale, a saga that continues to intrigue and confound us to this day. And while Attila's legend may be larger than life, the reality of his reign is a testament to the power and peril of charisma, cunning, and the relentless pursuit of power. Stay tuned, because the story of Attila the Hun is far from over, and the next chapter promises to be just as compelling. And so, as Attila's reputation as the ultimate party crasher of empires reached its zenith, let's take a detour into the less glamorous but equally intriguing corridors of his domestic rule. Yes, Attila the Hun, the guy synonymous with chaos and conquest, was also running a mobile empire that resembled a steampunk version of a Fortune 500 company. Spoiler alert, there were no PowerPoint presentations, but plenty of horse-dung and diplomatic chess. First up, Attila's legal reforms. Wait, what? Legal reforms from the guy whose idea of a negotiation was pointing out which city he'd sack next? Believe it or not, the Hunnic Empire wasn't just a roving gaggle of sword-wielding maniacs. Attila understood that to maintain control over his patchwork empire stretching from the Rhine to the Caucasus, he needed laws, or at least something resembling laws. Attila's legal system was less about parchment and more about pragmatism. His court, a sort of proto-Jerry Springer show, was where disputes were settled, alliances forged, and enemies subtly threatened. The Huns didn't codify laws like the Romans with their 12 tables. Instead, they relied on oral traditions and the wisdom of tribal leaders. It was a loose but effective system, kind of like solving disputes at Thanksgiving dinner. If your family was armed to the teeth and had a penchant for horse archery. Economic policy? You bet. Attila was an empire manager who knew his way around a spreadsheet, metaphorically speaking. The Huns needed a steady influx of resources to keep their empire humming. This meant not just raiding, but also trading and, brace yourself, taxing. Attila's economic model was built on the spoils of war, but it was supplemented by tribute and trade. His empire had clients, not just subjects, and he used the influx of wealth to reward loyalty and fund his campaigns. The result? A mobile economy that was as unpredictable as a game of Monopoly in a windstorm. Now, let's pivot to Attila's personal life, which could give any modern reality TV star a run for their money. The man had a penchant for accumulating wives like some people collect stamps. By the time of his death, he reportedly had a harem of wives, with the number varying depending on who you ask historians or tabloid writers. His marriages were often political alliances, a way to secure loyalty from various tribes. But here's the kicker, Attila's domestic affairs weren't all sunshine and roses. His personal life was as tumultuous as his battlefields, filled with intrigue and, quite possibly, the occasional betrayal. And speaking of his untimely demise, let's address the infamous death by nosebleed story. Legend has it that Attila died on his wedding night in 453 AD, not in a blaze of glory on the battlefield, but in his marital bed, felled by a nosebleed. It's the kind of tale that would make even Shakespeare raise an eyebrow. The reality? Historians are skeptical. Some suggest he might have suffered a burst blood vessel due to heavy drinking and a hearty meal. Others whisper conspiracies of assassination. Either way, Attila's death was as enigmatic as his life, shrouded in mystery and ripe for myth-making. So, What does this tell us about Attila? For one, he was no mere barbarian chieftain. He was a complex leader who understood the importance of structure, even amid chaos. His empire was built on speed and terror, yes, but also on a shrewd understanding of politics and economics. He was a ruler who could pivot from battlefield general to courtroom judge, from marauding conqueror to husband and negotiator. His story is a testament to the multifaceted nature of leadership in the ancient world. As we delve deeper into the domestic side of Attila's reign, we're reminded that history is rarely black and white. It's a vast tapestry of contradictions, where the same man who struck fear into the heart of Rome could also preside over a council of tribal leaders and debate the finer points of diplomacy. Attila's legacy is as much about his ability to adapt and innovate as it is about his reputation for destruction. So, as we leave the Hunnic Empire's inner workings and return to the grand stage of European conflict, remember that Attila was more than the sum of his battles. He was a leader who could wield charisma like a weapon, who understood that power was as much about perception as reality. His life was a balancing act between legend and leadership, and the echoes of his reign continue to reverberate through history. In the next chapter, we'll continue to explore how Attila's legacy was shaped by both his enduring myth and the harsh realities of his time. His story is far from over, and as we venture further into the annals of history, we'll see just how profound his impact truly was. Stay tuned, because the tale of Attila the Hun is a saga of epic proportions, with twists and turns that rival the most captivating of dramas. As we venture further into the annals of history, let's dive headfirst into the finale of Attila's story, where the wheels of fate spin faster than a Hunnic horse galloping across the plains. We left off with a leader who could pivot from marauder to mediator, a man whose empire stretched from the Rhine to the Caucasus, yet whose life ended in the most anticlimactic way possible. Yep, the feared Scourge of God likely met his maker not in a glorious battle, but possibly due to a nosebleed on his wedding night in 453 AD. Talk about a tragicomic twist worthy of a Netflix drama. Now, Attila's sudden departure from the mortal coil set off a chain reaction that led to the Hunnic Empire's rapid unravelling. It's like your favourite band breaking up right after their biggest hit. The Huns had built their empire on the charisma and cunning of a single man, and without his unifying presence, the cracks quickly began to show. Attila's sons, who probably thought they were stepping into a legacy of endless plunder and power, found themselves in a less-than-ideal situation. They squabbled over the spoils like contestants on a particularly cutthroat reality show, each one vying for control, but lacking their father's knack for leadership. By 454 AD, just a year after Attila's death, the Battle of Nidau saw the Huns facing a coalition of former subjects and allies who were now chafing under their rule. Spoiler alert, it didn't end well for Team Attila Jr. The Huns were defeated, their power shattered like a dropped vase, and their empire dissolved faster than a sugar cube in hot tea. It's a classic tale of what goes up must come down, with the added lesson that building an empire on the back of one man's personality is a risky business. In the grand scheme of things, the fall of the Hunnic Empire serves as a cautionary tale for modern leaders. Sure, Attila was a rock star of his time, a master of intimidation and strategy, but his empire was more house of cards than fortress. Without a clear succession plan or a stable administrative structure, it couldn't withstand the shock of his sudden absence. It's a reminder that charisma can take you far, but it won't necessarily keep you there. Leadership isn't just about inspiring fear or rallying troops, it's about building systems that endure beyond your personal reign. And speaking of enduring, let's chat about Attila's legacy. History remembers him as the Scourge of God, a title that suggests equal parts terror and divine retribution. To the Romans, he was the ultimate bogeyman, the embodiment of chaos and destruction. Yet, it's important to remember that much of Attila's fearsome reputation was crafted by his enemies. The Romans, ever the dramatists, loved a good villain, and Attila fit the bill perfectly. His actual deeds, while certainly impactful, were amplified by the power of story. But what's the real takeaway from Attila's life and legacy? For one, he reminds us that fear is a potent weapon, but it can be a double-edged sword. Attila wielded fear like a maestro, orchestrating his campaigns with a flair for the dramatic that would put any Hollywood director to shame. Yet, the fear he inspired also meant that when he was gone, there was no one left to hold the disparate elements of his empire together. In essence, he was both the glue and the solvent of his own creation. Another lesson lies in the impermanence of power. Attila's empire was as vast as it was fleeting, a testament to the idea that empires built on conquest alone are often the most vulnerable. The Hunnic Empire left little behind in terms of physical legacy, no grand structures or lasting institutions. Instead, it left a mark in the psyche of its contemporaries, a shadow that loomed large in their historical narratives. So, what can modern leaders learn from Attila? Perhaps it's the importance of balancing charisma with substance, of building legacies that endure beyond individual achievements. Attila's story is a vivid reminder that while it's thrilling to be the star of the show, it's even more impressive to write a script that stands the test of time. As we wrap up this tale of ambition, power, and the fickle nature of legacy, let's not forget the human element. Attila was a product of his time, a figure who rose to prominence through a combination of circumstance, skill, and sheer audacity. His life was a whirlwind of contradictions. A leader who could both unite and devastate, who inspired loyalty and fear in equal measure. He was a complex character in the grand theatre of history, and his story continues to captivate us because it reflects the timeless dance between power and its inevitable decline. In the end, Attila the Hun remains a figure shrouded in both myth and reality, a cautionary tale and a legend rolled into one. His legacy is a mosaic of fear, charisma, and the relentless pursuit of power, offering lessons for those willing to look beyond the legend. So, as you drift off with these new insights, remember that history, much like a good story, is rarely straightforward. It's a tapestry woven from the threads of human endeavour, ambition, and the eternal quest to leave a mark on the world. And Attila, for all his flaws and ferocity, certainly left his. Ferdinand Magellan, the man who would one day sail further than his mom probably thought was wise, began his story in Portugal, 1480. He was born in Sabrosa, a small town with not much going on except for a future explorer in diapers. There's nothing like the quiet of the countryside to make a young man dream of adventure. Little Ferdinand, or Ferdinand de Magalhães, as his neighbours knew him, was born into a family of minor nobility. They had just enough prestige to keep appearances, but not enough to avoid the occasional awkward barter at the local market. Growing up, Magellan wasn't exactly handed the world on a silver platter, but he wasn't picking nettles for dinner either. He had the kind of upbringing that makes you want more than Sabrosa could ever offer. By the time he was in his teens, Magellan was shipped off to Lisbon. His parents might have thought they were sending him to further his education, but really they were unwittingly signing him up for a life of high seas and high stakes. In Lisbon, circa 1495, young Magellan found himself at the royal court, where the air was thick with the scent of ambition and slightly overcooked peacock. The Portuguese court was a bustling place, full of intrigue, backstabbing, and the occasional joust in the hallway. Here, Magellan learned the art of navigation, astronomy, and how to navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. He was a quick study, which was a good thing because, in those days, one wrong move could easily turn you into a court jester. Now, let's set the scene a bit. The late 15th and early 16th centuries were heady times for explorers. The age of discovery was in full swing, and Europe was chomping at the bit to find new trade routes. The spice trade was the Bitcoin of the day, and everyone wanted a piece of the action. Nutmeg, cloves, and cinnamon were more valuable than gold. Not to mention, they made your mutton stew far more palatable. Portugal was one of the main players in this high-stakes game. It was a tiny country with big dreams, and it had already made a name for itself by rounding the Cape of Good Hope and reaching India, thanks to Vasco da Gama, who probably had a great time laughing at his mates stuck in the Mediterranean. The economic climate was all about expansion, and the political scene was a never-ending chess game with Spain, France, and anyone else with a fleet and a flag. Magellan's first taste of the ocean wasn't exactly a pleasure cruise. He joined the Portuguese fleet in 1505 when he was about 25. If you're picturing a dashing young sailor with a twinkle in his eye, you might want to rethink that image. This was no Pirates of the Caribbean. It was more like Pirates of the Unwashed Masses. Ships were cramped, hygiene was a rumour, and the food was one step above starvation rations. But hey, it was better than sitting around in Lisbon waiting for someone to invent Netflix. His early naval experiences took him to India, where he was involved in the Battle of Diu in 59. Picture this. A young Magellan standing on the deck of a Portuguese carrack, cannonballs flying, as he faced off against the combined fleets of the Mamluks, Ottoman Turks, and the Sultan of Gujarat. It was a baptism by fire, and it taught him that the sea was both a harsh mistress and a ticket to glory, if you could survive. By 1511, Magellan was part of the expedition that captured Malacca, a bustling trade hub on the Malay Peninsula. This was a big deal because control of Malacca meant control of the spice trade routes. For Magellan, it was another notch on his belt and a chance to prove himself. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. Rumour has it that he got into some hot water for trading illegally with the locals. It seems Magellan had a bit of a rebellious streak, perhaps a precursor to his later defiance of the Portuguese crown. Despite his successes, Magellan found himself out of favour upon his return to Portugal. Maybe it was the hushed whispers of insubordination or just bad timing, but he was denied the rewards he expected. So, what's a disgruntled sailor with a thirst for adventure to do? Why, switch teams, of course. In 1517, he offered his services to King Charles I of Spain, a move that went over in Portugal about as well as a lead balloon. This wasn't just a career change, it was a full-blown defection. Magellan had been bitten by the explorer bug and was convinced there was a western sea route to the Spice Islands, now part of modern-day Indonesia. He might have been seen as a traitor, but he was a traitor with a plan. Spain, still licking its wounds from Columbus's failure to find Asia, was more than happy to take a chance on Magellan. After all, if he succeeded, Spain would have a direct trade route to the spices that everyone was so mad about. In 1519, Magellan set out under the Spanish flag, leading a fleet of 5 ships. What happened next is the stuff of legend, but that's a tale for another time. For now, it's enough to say that young Ferdinand from the sleepy town of Sabrosa had set his course for immortality. He was ready to face the oceans, the unknown, and, most terrifying of all, the wrath of the Portuguese crown. But those are the kind of details we'll dive into later. For now, let's just say that Magellan was about to make waves, literally and figuratively. So, there we have Magellan, ready to make waves and ruffle feathers, and what better place to do it than on the high seas? Now, selling a western sea route to the Spice Islands wasn't just about whispering sweet nautical nothings into the ear of the Spanish crown. It was more like convincing them you could find a unicorn and charge admission. The stakes were high, the risks were higher, and Magellan's confidence was, well, let's just say it was at a level that could rival any Instagram influencer today. First, there was the small matter of logistics. How do you plan a trip to the Spice Islands when the maps might as well be drawn by your neighbour's 5-year-old? Magellan needed ships, men, and, most importantly, cash. The kind of cash that made even the golden beaches of Goa look like loose change. Enter Charles I of Spain, a king who was young, ambitious, and possibly a bit too enamoured with the idea of outshining his Portuguese rivals. Magellan pitched his plan with the zeal of a late-night infomercial, but with far fewer guarantees. The Spanish crown, no stranger to wild gambles, hello Columbus, saw potential in Magellan's scheme. They agreed to fund the expedition, offering resources that amounted to a princely sum of 8,071,125 maravedis. That's an eye-watering number, even if you haven't the foggiest what a maravedi is. For context, think of it as a medieval start-up fund, where the return on investment wasn't just profits but geopolitical bragging rights. Next, Magellan assembled his fleet, the Armada de Molucca. It sounds grand, right? Well, let's not get carried away. This was no armada of sleek yachts, it was a motley crew of 5 ships, Trinidad, San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, and Santiago. Each was a floating wooden wonder of the 16th century, which is to say, a creaky contraption that would make anyone seasick just by looking at it. These ships were the equivalent of a used car lot with questionable mileage. But ships are nothing without sailors, and here's where the crew dynamics get as spicy as the very cloves they sought. The crew was a mixed bag of the good, the bad, and the downright mutinous. Magellan, a Portuguese, leading a Spanish-funded expedition, was already a walking diplomatic incident waiting to happen. His crew consisted of Spaniards who weren't too thrilled about taking orders from a countryman of their enemy. Add a few Italians, Greeks, and even a Moor, and you've got a United Nations meeting on the high seas, minus the translators. And let's talk about the conditions these men faced. Forget about room service or even a private cabin. Cramped quarters, hard tack that could double as a weapon, and water that was more bacteria than beverage. This was a voyage where scurvy was as inevitable as getting sunburnt on the beach. Yet, despite these challenges, the allure of spices that could transform bland European cuisine was too tempting to resist. As the fleet prepared to set sail in September 1519, the mood was a mix of excitement and dread. They were heading into the unknown, driven by dreams of riches and the glory of charting a path that would make them legends, or, at the very least, allow them to return home without being laughed out of the tavern. Magellan, ever the visionary, was ready to risk it all, convinced of the existence of a strait that would lead them to the Pacific and beyond. But let's not romanticize things too much. This wasn't just about exploration for exploration's sake. It was about cold, hard economics. The Spice Islands, those tiny specks on the map, were the source of nutmeg and cloves that could fetch a price higher than gold. Control those, and you controlled a market that had European kitchens begging for flavour. In short, spices were the cryptocurrency of the 1500s, and Magellan was determined to mine it. As the sails unfurled and the Armada de Malacca left the familiar shores of Seville, they knew they were embarking on a journey that was as much about endurance as it was about discovery. The Spanish crown had placed a monumental bet on Magellan, and he knew there was no turning back. He was about to navigate uncharted waters, face mutinies, and battle the elements, all for a chance to find that elusive western route. So here we leave Magellan, at the dawn of his greatest adventure. He was a man driven by ambition, backed by a crown that saw opportunity in the unknown. With a fleet that was as diverse as it was dubious, he set out to rewrite the maps and the history books. But, as with any good tale of exploration, the real drama was yet to unfold. The winds of fate were blowing, and they were about to carry Magellan into the annals of history. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's plenty more sea to sail and stories to tell. As the Armada de Malacca slipped away from Seville's comforting shores, it was clear that Magellan and his crew were in for a ride that would make any theme park roller coaster look like a merry-go-round. Their journey kicked off with a hopeful start, but the seas were not about to roll out a welcome mat. This was the 16th century, after all, where the ocean was less of a highway and more of a sentient beast with a penchant for chaos. First up on the itinerary was the Canary Islands, a pit stop to stock up on the essentials, water, food, and maybe a little gossip from those who'd already tried their luck against the Atlantic. But before they knew it, they were back on the waves, coasting toward the coast of South America. The crossing of the Atlantic was no Caribbean cruise. It took nearly 3 months, during which the crew faced the usual suspects: scurvy, boredom, and the kind of cabin fever that makes you question if your shipmate really sounds like a seagull or if you're just losing your mind. By December 1519, the fleet reached the shores of what is now Brazil. The land of samba and soccer was still a few centuries away from its cultural heyday, but it was a welcome sight nonetheless. Here, they restocked supplies and perhaps enjoyed a brief respite from the swaying decks and questionable meals. The crew likely feasted on fresh fruits and meats, a smorgasbord that must have felt like manna from heaven after months of hardtack and salted meat. But Magellan, ever the man with a mission, was not about to let a tropical paradise derail his plans. They pressed on southward, hugging the coastline like a driver unsure of their directions. As they sailed along the coast of Patagonia, the weather turned as frosty as a January morning in Siberia. This was a region as inhospitable as it was breathtaking, where the winds could whisk your hat off before you had a chance to say, "Pass the rum." As they approached the entrance to what would later be known as the Strait of Magellan, things got dicey. The weather was as unpredictable as a toddler with a sugar high, and the waters were a tangled mess of channels and islands, each one looking like it might lead to the Pacific or possibly to nowhere. Navigation was less about charts and compasses and more about gut instincts and crossed fingers. Now, let's address the elephant in the room: mutiny. Yes, the crew mutinied not once, but twice. First, in April 1520, as the fleet huddled for winter at Port St. Julian. Imagine being stuck in freezing conditions with your least favourite co-workers, and you'll get a sense of why tensions ran high. The Spanish captains, perhaps feeling a bit miffed that a Portuguese was calling the shots, decided to challenge Magellan's authority. Their insubordination was less about high ideals and more about self-preservation and a desire to head back to Spain with their heads and careers intact. But Magellan wasn't about to let a little thing like mutiny derail his plans. He squashed the rebellion with a mix of cunning and ruthlessness that would make any Game of Thrones character proud. One captain was executed, another left behind, and a third was placed in chains. It was a brutal reminder that leadership, especially on the high seas, was not for the faint of heart. After all, nothing says, "I'm in charge," quite like a public hanging. Despite the mutiny, Magellan's determination remained unshaken. By October 1520, after months of searching and navigating through an intricate maze of waterways, they finally found the passage. The strait, now bearing Magellan's name, was a narrow, treacherous route that threaded through the southern tip of South America. It was a discovery that would change the course of history, but at the time, it was just a gateway to the unknown. The journey through the strait took 38 days, a month and change of nerve-wracking navigation through waters that seemed to have a personal vendetta against sailors. It was here that the Santiago met its fate, wrecked by the merciless waves. The loss was a stark reminder that the sea claimed its own toll, indifferent to human ambition. Finally, on November 28, 1520, the fleet emerged into the vast waters of the Pacific Ocean. But if they thought the hard part was over, they were in for a surprise. The Pacific, deceptively named for its calm appearance, turned out to be a vast, unending expanse that seemed to stretch into infinity. It was here, in the so-called peaceful ocean, that the real struggle for survival began. The crossing of the Pacific was a grueling ordeal. For 99 days, the crew endured extreme hardships. Supplies dwindled, and soon they were reduced to eating sawdust-infused biscuits and whatever rats they could catch, a delicacy only when compared to starvation. Fresh water became as rare as a unicorn, and scurvy ran rampant, claiming the lives of many sailors. By the time they reached Guam in March 1521, the fleet was a shadow of its former self, the men gaunt and weary from their ordeal. Despite all these challenges, Magellan remained steadfast, driven by a vision that was as clear to him as the stars he used to navigate. His leadership style, often criticized as harsh and unyielding, was, in reality, a necessity. In an era where the seas were as unpredictable as politics at court, a firm hand was needed to keep the mission on course. He wasn't the tyrant some accounts make him out to be, nor was he the romanticized hero of other tales. He was a man of his time, navigating not just the waves, but the complex currents of human nature and ambition. The voyage was a testament to human endurance, a saga of survival against the odds. It was about more than just discovering new lands. It was about pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Magellan's journey was a crucible, forging a legacy that would outlast him, shaping the world in ways he could scarcely have imagined. But as they sailed closer to the Spice Islands, the ultimate prize, it was clear that the journey was far from over. The winds of fate were still at play, and the Pacific had one more card to deal. But that's a story for another time, as the saga of Magellan's voyage continues to unfold. Ah, the winds of fate, ever the capricious masters of sailors and explorers alike. As Magellan's fleet limped into the Spice Islands, they must have felt like marathon runners stumbling onto the final mile, not yet victorious, but tantalizingly close. The year was 1521, and they had reached the Philippines, a cluster of islands that would soon become infamous in their tale, thanks to one fateful encounter. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's set the stage for the drama that would soon unfold. The fleet, having endured a Pacific crossing that was more a testament to human willpower than an actual voyage, was in dire need of rest and supplies. So when they landed in Cebu, they were eager to make friends. Their greeting? Guns and gifts, naturally. Nothing says, "Let's be pals," like a show of technological superiority mixed with a little bribery. Magellan met with Raja Humabon, the local chieftain, and convinced him to convert to Christianity. It was a diplomatic win, at least on the surface. But this wasn't just about spreading the good word. It was about securing allegiance and, more importantly, a steady supply of provisions for the journey ahead. Now, here's where the cultural misunderstandings start brewing like a storm over the horizon. Magellan, armed with the confidence of a man who's navigated both seas and court politics, believed that his new allies would help him secure the Spice Islands. But in reality, the situation was a complex web of local rivalries and politics that would make any Game of Thrones plot seem straightforward by comparison. Enter Lapu-Lapu, the chieftain of nearby Mactan Island. Unlike Humabon, Lapu-Lapu wasn't interested in kowtowing to foreign invaders, no matter how shiny their armor or how grand their promises. When Magellan decided to flex his newfound alliances by demanding Lapu-Lapu's submission, the local leader wasn't having it. Instead, he decided to stand his ground, a decision that would soon turn Magellan's voyage into a cautionary tale about hubris. Fast forward to April 27, 1521, and we find Magellan striding onto the shores of Mactan with about 50 men, ready to teach Lapu-Lapu a lesson in European superiority. Or so he thought. His strategic errors were numerous, starting with underestimating the local warriors' resolve and overestimating the effectiveness of his own firepower. Magellan's muskets were rendered almost useless in the shallow waters that his men had to wade through, turning what might have been a strategic advantage into a logistical nightmare. Now, the romanticized versions of this battle paint Magellan as a tragic hero, a noble explorer cut down by savages. But let's be honest, this was a man who, despite his navigational prowess, blundered into a fight he didn't understand, on a terrain he didn't control, against an opponent he didn't respect. The battle was less a glorious last stand and more a grim reminder that guns and armor don't guarantee victory against a determined foe. Magellan, for all his brilliance, was struck down in the melee. Accounts vary, but it's generally agreed that he was overwhelmed by Lapu-Lapu's forces, felled by spears and swords. The Battle of Mactan was a stark illustration of the limits of European power and the complexities of indigenous resistance. The romantic appeal of Magellan's death lies in its dramatic finality, but the reality was a chaotic skirmish that ended a man's life and nearly derailed an entire expedition. With their leader gone, the surviving crew faced a sobering choice: continue the mission or turn back in defeat. And here's where the story takes a fascinating turn. The remaining ships, now under the command of Juan Sebastián Elcano, decided to press on. They had come too far, suffered too much, to return empty-handed. The promise of spices, those tiny seeds of economic salvation, was too enticing to abandon. So, what happened next? Elcano and his crew managed to reach the Spice Islands, albeit battered and bruised. It was a bittersweet victory, marked by the realization that the journey had cost them dearly. Of the original 5 ships, only the Victoria made it back to Spain, completing the first circumnavigation of the globe in 1522. It was a monumental achievement, a testament to human resilience and determination. Despite the high cost, the economic impact of the expedition was significant. The spices they brought back were sold for a hefty sum, enough to cover the expedition's costs and then some. It wasn't the golden triumph they'd imagined, but it was enough to cement their place in history. The voyage had demonstrated the interconnectedness of the world, a harbinger of the global trade networks that would soon follow. And yet, the story doesn't end with a triumphant return. The aftermath of Magellan's voyage was a mixed bag of celebration and controversy. While the Spanish crown hailed the journey as a success, the loss of life and resources raised questions about the true cost of exploration. Magellan's legacy was debated. Was he a visionary or a foolhardy adventurer? But truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. As we leave this chapter of Magellan's tale, it's clear that the voyage was more than just a quest for spices. It was a journey into the unknown, a gamble that paid off in ways no one could have predicted. The myths surrounding Magellan's death and the romanticized vision of his expedition are compelling, but they obscure the harsh realities and strategic errors that defined his final days. In the end, Magellan's story is a reminder of the dual nature of exploration, the lure of the unknown, balanced against the stark realities of human ambition and error. His journey changed the world, but it came at a price that echoes through history, a testament to the enduring human spirit and the relentless pursuit of discovery. As for the Spice Islands, they remained a tantalizing prize, a symbol of both economic opportunity and the complex legacy of European exploration. But there's more to this saga, and the winds of history have yet to tell their full tale. Stay tuned, because the story is far from over. And so, as the Spice Islands faded into the horizon behind Elcano's ship, the Victoria, the legacy of Magellan's circumnavigation began to unfurl across the globe like a map newly unscrolled. The expedition was a triumph wrapped in tragedy, a narrative that sailed beyond the bounds of mere geography and into the heart of economic and geopolitical transformations. The voyage had fundamentally redrawn the lines of trade and power, making it clear that the world was a sphere, not just in theory but in practice, a realization that would cost many a flat earther their evening pint at the local inn. Now, let's talk numbers, because, as they say, the devil is in the details, and Magellan's voyage was no exception. The cost of the expedition was a staggering 8,751,105 maravedis, a sum that could have probably bought enough cinnamon to spice up every bland dish in Europe for a decade. Yet, by the time the Victoria limped back to Spain in September 1522, carrying just 26 survivors and 26 tons of precious spices, the venture had recouped its investment and then some. The sale of these spices not only covered the costs, but also demonstrated the lucrative potential of direct trade routes, proving that even in the 16th century, sometimes you had to spend money to make money. Economically, the impact was seismic. The circumnavigation underscored the importance of global trade networks, setting the stage for the age of exploration's next chapter 1, filled with even more ambitious voyages, increased competition among European powers, and, unfortunately, the exploitation and colonization of indigenous peoples. The Spanish crown, while mourning the loss of Magellan, couldn't ignore the economic windfall of their gamble. The expedition turned spices into the solid gold of the day, making the Iberian Peninsula a buzzing hive of trade and commerce, albeit one tinged with the blood and sweat of those who paid the ultimate price for exploration. But let's not forget the geopolitical ripple effects. Magellan's voyage was the match that lit the powder keg of European rivalry. Spain, having successfully navigated the globe, found itself in a stronger negotiating position against its Portuguese neighbours. The Treaty of Tordesillas, that 1494 line in the sand drawn by the Pope to divvy up the New World like a cake at a birthday party, suddenly seemed inadequate. The new maritime routes discovered by the Spaniards led to Spain challenging Portugal's dominance in the east, sparking a diplomatic dance that lasted for decades. The world was carving itself up faster than a turkey on Thanksgiving, and every nation with a ship wanted a piece of the pie. Magellan's story, however, is more than a tale of economic and territorial gains. His circumnavigation remains a powerful testament to human ambition and the insatiable quest for knowledge. It was a journey that proved the interconnectedness of the world, at a time when most people still thought you'd fall off the edge if you sailed too far. The expedition opened up new horizons, not just for Spain, but for all of Europe, shifting the focus from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic and beyond. It was as if someone had turned the world map upside down and shook it for good measure, revealing new opportunities and challenges. Yet, despite the undeniable impact, the myth of Magellan often eclipses the reality. History loves a good story, and Magellan's is as epic as they come. He was a man who dared to defy the odds, who navigated uncharted waters with little more than the stars as his guide. It's the kind of narrative that makes for stirring textbooks and inspiring speeches, but it's also full of holes big enough to sail a galleon through. Magellan didn't complete the circumnavigation himself. He died in the Philippines, a victim of his own hubris, and it was Elcano who brought the journey to its triumphant conclusion. Yet the name Magellan resonates through time, a convenient symbol for the triumphs and tragedies of exploration. So why does history favour the myth over the man? Perhaps because myths are tidy, easily digestible. They offer heroes and villains, clear beginnings and endings. They allow us to gloss over the gritty realities, the strategic blunders, and the human cost. Magellan's story is no different, a tale polished by time until it shines with the allure of adventure and discovery. But beneath the surface lies a more complex truth, one that acknowledges the price of ambition and the unpredictability of fate. In the end, Magellan's legacy is as multifaceted as the world he helped to chart. His voyage was a catalyst for change, a harbinger of the globalized world we live in today. It was a reminder that exploration is as much about resilience and adaptability as it is about glory and conquest. And while the romanticized version of Magellan's journey may continue to captivate the imagination, the reality offers a richer tapestry of lessons about leadership, about the power of vision, and about the enduring human spirit that seeks to push beyond the horizon. As we leave this story, it's clear that Magellan's circumnavigation was more than just a footnote in the annals of history. It was a turning point, a moment when the world became a little smaller and a lot more connected. It paved the way for future explorers, dreamers, and adventurers, and set the stage for the complex interplay of cultures and economies that defines our world today. So, as you drift off to sleep, ponder this. Magellan might have been just one man, but his voyage was a giant leap for mankind, one that continues to echo through the ages. The crack of dawn in Edo, Japan, and you, a samurai, are already up and at it. No snooze button in your tatami-matted room, just the subtle rustle of bamboo and the distant crow of a rooster that never seems to tire of its own voice. You stretch, feeling the weight of both your armor and your responsibilities as a retainer of the Tokugawa shogunate. Life in the 17th century is no cakewalk, but hey, at least you don't have to deal with modern traffic jams, just the occasional horse-drawn cart. Let's dive into your morning ritual, shall we? First things first, your blade. Your katana isn't just for show, it's an extension of your very soul. You've got a morning routine that makes a CrossFit session look like a stroll in the park. Sword practice, or kenjutsu, is your bread and butter. Swing, parry, thrust. Each move is as precise as it is symbolic. But don't get too caught up in the romance of it all. Despite what Hollywood loves to sell, you're not some lone wolf wandering the countryside looking for a jewel. You're bound by a rigid social hierarchy, a chess piece in a vast game controlled by the Tokugawa clan. The shogunate's grip is tighter than the laces on your waraji. Ah, the Tokugawa shogunate, the puppet masters of your fate. Under their watchful eye, Japan enjoys a rare period of peace and political stability, known as the Edo period, lasting from 1603 to 1868. That's 265 years of relative calm, a feat considering the chaos of the Sengoku period that preceded it. But peace has its price, and for you, it means navigating a society where every step is dictated by a strict class system. Samurai, farmers, artisans, merchants, everyone has their place, and stepping out of line, not an option. Now, let's talk economics, because, yes, even a samurai has to balance the books. You're not just a sword-swinging warrior, you're also a landlord managing not one, but two households. The Sankan Kotai system requires you to maintain residences both in Edo and your home province. It's like having a city loft and a country estate, except both are constantly draining your resources. Every other year you're expected to make the journey to Edo, a trek that could take weeks depending on where you call home. And let's not forget the entourage you have to bring along. Servants, retainers, even horses. Those expenses stack up faster than you can draw your blade. Your day isn't just about swinging swords and balancing budgets, though. Morning is also a time for philosophical reflection, because what's a samurai without a bit of introspection? You might crack open a scroll of Confucian texts or contemplate the teachings of Zen Buddhism. It's about finding harmony between martial prowess and moral integrity. Bushido, the way of the warrior, isn't just about knowing how to fight, it's about knowing why you fight. Loyalty, honor, and duty. These are your guiding stars in the vast sea of samurai life. But before you start thinking it's all Zen gardens and cherry blossoms, let's bust a few myths. The romantic notion of the samurai as a noble warrior poet often glosses over the harsher realities. Sure, there's a certain appeal to the idea of living by the sword, but the truth is, many samurai found themselves in financial binds. In fact, some of your peers end up moonlighting as bureaucrats or even teachers to make ends meet. Not exactly the glamorous life of a wandering ronin, huh? It's all part of the balancing act that defines your existence. You're a warrior in a time of peace, a nobleman who must also be a savvy businessman. Every decision, every swing of the sword, every line of text you ponder is a step in the delicate dance that is your life. So, as the sun rises over Edo, casting its golden glow over the city's pagodas and the calm surface of the Sumida River, you prepare to face another day. It's a life caught between legend and reality, and as you tie your hakama and adjust your katana, you know you wouldn't have it any other way. And with your katana adjusted just so, it's time to put away the warrior persona and slip into another role, that of a civil servant. Yes, that's right, samurai life in the 17th century isn't all battles and blades. You're also a bureaucratic cog in the wheel of the Tokugawa shogunate, the ancient world's answer to corporate life. Forget the romanticized notion of galloping into the sunset. Today, you're galloping towards a mountain of paperwork that would make a modern tax accountant break into a cold sweat. First on the agenda, taxes. And no, this doesn't mean you're armed with a calculator and spreadsheets. Instead, your ledger is filled with rice. Yep, rice. Those little grains are the currency of the realm. In Edo, Japan, money doesn't grow on trees, it grows in paddies. Rice is the economic backbone here, and it's your job to ensure the shogunate gets its cut. Imagine explaining to your lord why the rice yields are down this season. It's like trying to justify a budget shortfall to a particularly stern CFO. Now, here's a fun twist. While rice is king, actual currency does exist. Coins like the Koban and Mon are floating around, but they're more like the Bitcoin of your time, used, but not exactly mainstream. The real wealth is measured in kokoku, a unit representing how much rice it takes to feed one man for a year, roughly 150 kilograms. So, every decision you make, every peasant you tax, and every budget line you juggle is tied to this grainy economic standard. You're not just counting koku, you're counting calories, quite literally. Let's talk inefficiencies because, boy, are they abundant. Your office is a tatami-matted room stacked with scrolls and inkstones, the 17th century version of a cubicle. Meetings are held face-to-face, with your fellow samurai, each trying to outbow the other in a show of respect. No emails here, just messengers and runners. And if you think snail mail is slow, try coordinating an entire estate's taxes via horseback. You'd think with all the swordplay, someone could have invented a faster way to send messages. And what about those scrolls? They're your lifeline to the shogunate's vast bureaucracy. Imagine deciphering edicts written in kanji, a script so intricate that a single stroke could change the meaning entirely. It's like playing a never-ending game of Sudoku, except the stakes are as high as your lord's expectations. Misinterpret a directive and, well, let's just say the repercussions aren't pretty. The shogunate doesn't take kindly to errors, intentional or not. But here's the kicker. Despite all this red tape, you're still expected to maintain your status. A samurai's appearance is as crucial as his swordsmanship. Your wardrobe demands attention, and those silken ohori jackets don't come cheap. It's a bit like having to wear a designer suit to work every day. Appearances must be maintained, even if your wallet weeps. And don't forget the entourage. You're not just an individual, you're an institution. Servants, attendants and retainers are part of the package, each one adding to the cost of your status. Yet, amidst this bureaucratic ballet, there's a curious camaraderie. You're not alone in this tangled web of governance. Other samurai are right there with you, juggling the same responsibilities. It's a fraternity of sorts, bound by shared duties and the occasional gripe about the inefficiencies of the system. Over a cup of sake, you might swap stories of bureaucratic blunders, each tale a testament to the absurdities of pre-digital governance. And while we're busting myths, let's tackle the notion of the samurai as lone wolves. Far from it. You're part of a network, a web of allegiances and duties that tie you to your lord, your family, and your fellow samurai. Loyalty is your guiding principle, and betrayal? Unthinkable. You're not just living for yourself, you're living for an entire system that depends on your honor and diligence. So, as the sun climbs higher, casting long shadows over Edo's bustling streets, you dive deeper into your duties. Each task, whether it's calculating taxes or drafting reports, is a reminder that being a samurai is as much about governance as it is about gallantry. The balance between martial and civil responsibilities is delicate, but it's one you've mastered over years of service, and as you roll up another scroll and send a messenger on his way, you can't help but marvel at the intricate dance of duty and honor that defines your life. You may be a samurai in a time of peace, but every day is a battle of its own sort, one fought with ink and rice instead of swords and shields. And just as you send that last scroll on its way, the metaphorical gong of lunchtime draws you back from the bureaucratic trenches, reminding you that even a samurai's stomach isn't immune to the call of a good meal. But don't get too comfortable. The afternoon promises a different kind of rigor. Here comes the transition from ink and rice to brush and tea, a pivot more dramatic than any plot twist Hollywood could concoct. Let's start with calligraphy, the art of writing that transforms kanji from mere symbols into a dance of ink and paper. This isn't just about jotting down grocery lists or penning love notes. Oh no, in the 17th century, your calligraphic prowess is akin to wielding a sword. Each stroke, each flick of the brush reflects your inner discipline and your grasp of the samurai ethos, balance, restraint, and precision. Miss a stroke, and it's like flubbing a parry in combat. It reveals a crack in your otherwise stoic armor. Now, before you dismiss calligraphy as a quaint pastime, let's bust a few myths. Sure, it looks serene, but it's as mentally taxing as any battlefield maneuver. Each kanji is a battlefield of its own, with strategies dictated by the weight of the brush, the texture of the paper, and the ink's consistency. And let's not forget the economic aspect. You can't just slather ink willy-nilly. Quality ink and paper aren't cheap, and you'd rather not explain to your lord why your art supplies are draining the estate's coffers. But why calligraphy? Why spend your afternoons hunched over paper instead of sparring in the dojo? It's simple social standing. Mastery of the brush can elevate your status, making you a patron of the arts rather than just a patron of war. In a society where appearances and reputations are as sharp as your katana, being seen as a cultured individual is crucial. You never know when your ability to compose a well-written haiku might impress a visiting dignitary or cement an alliance. Speaking of haikus, let's stroll into the world of poetry, where words are wielded like blades, sharp, precise, and deadly in their beauty. In an era where you can't just post your musings on social media, poetry is your outlet, your way to capture the fleeting beauty of the world around you. With only 17 syllables to work with, each haiku is like a miniature epic, a snapshot of your soul laid bare. It's an exercise in restraint, a reminder that not everything needs to be said to be understood. And here's where we debunk another myth, the notion that samurai are all brawn and no brain. The truth is, poetry is a mental sparring match, a battlefield of wit and wisdom. You're not just a warrior, you're a wordsmith, crafting verses that reflect your innermost thoughts and the world around you. This duality of being both a fighter and a thinker is what sets you apart, what makes the samurai more than just a historical footnote. Now, onto the tea ceremony, the pièce de résistance of your cultural pursuits. Picture this, a tranquil tea room, a ritual as choreographed as any dance, where every movement is deliberate and meaningful. It's not just about brewing a cup of tea, it's about creating a moment of harmony and introspection, a rare pause in the relentless tide of daily life. The tea ceremony is a microcosm of the samurai ethos, balance, respect, and mindfulness. But don't let the serene surface fool you. Behind the calm facade lies an intricate web of social cues and hierarchies. There's a reason the tea ceremony is as much about politics as it is about tea leaves. Consider it an ancient networking event where alliances are forged and rivalries simmer beneath a veneer of civility. Mastering the tea ceremony can make or break your social standing, a testament to your grace under pressure. And while we're on the topic of myth-busting, let's challenge the Hollywood portrayal of samurai as solely combat-focused. The reality is far richer and more complex. Sure, you can wield a sword with the best of them, but your role as a cultural tastemaker is equally important. You're not just a warrior, you're a connoisseur, a patron of the arts who shapes cultural trends. Your influence extends beyond the battlefield, into the realms of art and philosophy, leaving a legacy that echoes through the ages. So, as you set down your brush and savor the last sip of tea, remember this. Being a samurai is a balancing act, a delicate dance between the martial and the cultural. You're a paradox, a warrior poet, a tactician who navigates both the battlefield and the tea room with equal skill. It's a life of contradictions, of myth and reality, intertwining in a tapestry that's as intricate as the kanji you so carefully inscribe. And as the afternoon light wanes, casting long shadows over Edo's bustling streets, you prepare to transition once again. Because in the life of a samurai, the only constant is change, and the next chapter of your day awaits, filled with its own challenges and triumphs. The cultural pursuits may be over for today, but the lessons they impart will linger, shaping the warrior and the person you strive to become. As the afternoon drifts on, it's time to swap the brush for the bokken and dive back into the world of martial training. You might think that as a samurai, you've got the whole combat thing down to an art. But just like a musician who never stops practicing scales, your sword skills demand constant honing. There's no resting on laurels here. Each swing of the sword is a testament to your dedication. It's not about preparing for a duel at dawn, it's about maintaining a razor-sharp edge, both literally and metaphorically. Let's talk about that iconic katana of yours. Hollywood loves to portray it as an all-powerful weapon, capable of slicing through anything with the grace of a hot knife through butter. But in reality, your katana is more nuanced than that. It's a carefully crafted tool, forged with the kind of precision and skill that's the envy of blacksmiths everywhere. Each blade takes months to hammer out, requiring the expertise of artisans who combine metal layers to achieve the perfect balance of sharpness and durability. This isn't just a sword, it's the samurai's soul in steel form. Now, let's bust a myth. Despite the katana's legendary status, it's not your go-to weapon for every situation. In battle, you'd often reach for the yari, a spear that gives you a crucial reach advantage. Why? Because while the katana is fantastic for close-quarters combat, sometimes you just need a little more space between you and an enemy who forgot to practice their personal space etiquette. Versatility is key, my friend. And what about armor? Forget the sleek, streamlined suits of armor you see on TV. Real samurai armor, or yoroyak, is a patchwork of leather, iron and silk, designed to protect while still allowing for the kind of flexibility you'd need to dodge blows and dish them out. Each piece is custom-made, and let's be real, it's not exactly a light affair. We're talking about hauling around an extra 20 to 30 kilograms. That's like carrying a toddler on your back while trying to fend off an opponent. Not exactly the glamorous duel we often imagine. Maintaining this gear is a job in itself. You don't just toss your armor into a corner and call it a day. Each piece requires meticulous care, from oiling the leather to prevent cracking, to ensuring the silk cords remain taut and strong. And the katana? It demands a ritualistic cleaning process that involves oiling, polishing, and checking for even the tiniest nicks. This isn't just maintenance, it's a meditative practice, a way to connect with your weapon and ensure it remains an extension of yourself. Now, let's talk economics, because maintaining this arsenal isn't cheap. A high-quality katana could cost the equivalent of an entire year's salary for a lower-ranking samurai. Armor? You're looking at a similar price tag. It's like maintaining a luxury car. Each piece is an investment in your status and survival. And while the Tokugawa shogunate provides some stipends, the financial burden rests largely on your shoulders. This isn't the romanticized life of an unfettered warrior. It's a constant juggling act between duty and the cold, hard realities of finance. But let's not forget the social aspect of your training. You're not just swinging swords in isolation. You're part of a dojo, a community where alliances are forged and rivalries simmer. Training isn't just about perfecting your skills. It's about building a network of fellow samurai who might someday stand by your side in battle or vouch for you in the political arena. It's a bit like a 17th century LinkedIn, where strategic partnerships are as valuable as a well-timed strike. Speaking of political gamesmanship, let's dive into the strategic alliances you need to maintain your lord's favor. As a samurai, you're not just a warrior, you're a politician in armor, navigating a web of allegiances that could make or break your career. The Tokugawa shogunate demands loyalty, but it's a two-way street. You need to ensure your loyalty is visible, whether by showcasing your martial prowess or by demonstrating your cultural sophistication. These alliances extend beyond the dojo and into the court, where every gesture, every word is scrutinized. A misplaced bow or an ill-timed comment could unravel years of careful diplomacy. It's a game of chess, where each move must be calculated to advance your position without overstepping your bounds. You're not just fighting for honor, you're fighting for your future in a system that rewards cunning as much as courage. And while we're debunking myths, let's address the notion of the samurai as lone wolves. In reality, you're part of a highly structured network, bound by duty to your lord, your family, and your fellow samurai. Betrayal is unthinkable, because your entire existence is anchored in the loyalty that defines this intricate social fabric. You're not just living for yourself, you're living for the collective, a cog in the grand machine that is the Tokugawa shogunate. So, as the sun begins its descent and the dojo's shadows grow long, you wrap up your training session. Your body might ache from the day's exertions, but your spirit is invigorated. Each swing of the sword, each strategic alliance, and each carefully maintained piece of armor is a testament to the delicate balance you strike every day. It's a life caught between myth and reality, legend and fact, and as you retire for the evening, you know that tomorrow will bring its own set of challenges. But hey, you've got this. After all, you're a samurai. The dojo's shadows draw long, a signal that the day is slipping into the embrace of evening. As you step out, the air is thick with the sense of the city winding down, grilled fish mingling with the earthy aroma of rice paddies. You're headed home, and while the katana rests, the responsibilities of domestic life unsheathe themselves. The transition from warrior to family man is as swift and necessary as the change from armor to kimono. Now, let's talk about duty and domesticity, the yin and yang of samurai life. You might be a sword-wielding icon, but you're also the head of a household, a role that requires you to juggle ledgers and laundry lists with the same dexterity you show in the dojo. Your estate, whether modest or grand, is your responsibility, and ensuring its smooth operation is no small feat. When you're not practicing the art of war, you're practicing the art of delegation. Overseeing your servants, managing your land, and ensuring that your household runs like a well-oiled machine. And speaking of machines, let's dive into the gears that keep your household humming your family. The role of women in samurai families is often romanticized, but the reality is far more complex. Women, particularly samurai wives, are the backbone of the household. While you might be out training or politicking, your wife is the one who keeps everything together, managing finances, overseeing servants, and even defending the home if necessary. It's like being the CEO of a small corporation, except instead of stock options, she's working with rice yields and social standing. Women in samurai families were also well versed in martial arts, trained to protect the household in your absence. The naginata, a pole weapon, was often their tool of choice. It's a long stretch from the delicate tea ceremonies they're often associated with, but then again, life in 17th century Japan wasn't all about sipping matcha and arranging flowers. Women were warriors in their own right, both on the domestic front and in matters of defense. So next time someone tells you about the quiet, subservient samurai wife, feel free to tell them about the naginata and the fierce spirit required to wield it. But let's not forget the kids. The next generation of samurai, the little warriors in training. Education is paramount, with lessons in literature, calligraphy, and yes, swordsmanship. Boys and girls alike are taught the way of the warrior, because in this society, knowledge and skill are the real inheritance. Your children walk a fine line, learning not only how to fight, but also how to fit into a rigid social hierarchy. It's like preparing for a lifelong audition where the stakes are your family's honor and livelihood. No pressure, right? As the evening meal approaches, the family gathers. Dinner isn't just a time to refuel, it's a daily council meeting where strategies are discussed, alliances considered, and the day's events recounted. The food is simple but hearty: rice, pickled vegetables, and perhaps a bit of fish or miso soup. It's a reminder that even in a society obsessed with hierarchy and status, the essentials remain the same. The meal is a microcosm of your life, a balance between necessity and tradition, sustenance and ceremony. Now, let's tackle the myth of the solitary samurai. While popular culture loves to paint you as a lone wolf, the reality is you're very much a pack animal. Your life is deeply interwoven with your family's fortunes and misfortunes. Every decision you make, every battle you fight, echoes through your home. Your family's honor is your honor, and vice versa. It's a collective legacy, built one day at a time, one meal at a time. As the evening winds down, leisure activities beckon, though don't expect anything as frivolous as a modern-day Netflix binge. For you, leisure might mean a board game like shogi, a game of strategy that echoes the tactical maneuvers of your day job. Or perhaps a bit of poetry, the chance to express what your sword cannot. It's a moment to unwind, yes, but also a chance to sharpen your mind and reflect on the day's lessons. With the moon climbing high, it's time to wrap up with a healthy dose of myth-busting. The romantic image of the samurai as a noble warrior poet is not entirely a fabrication, but it's only half the story. The other half is filled with financial strain, bureaucratic labyrinths, and a constant balancing act between duty and domesticity. You're not just a relic of a bygone era, you're a complex individual navigating the intricacies of a society that demands both martial prowess and cultural sophistication. As you prepare for bed, the tatami mats creaking softly beneath your feet, you reflect on the day's journey. It's a life filled with contradictions, honor and obligation, tradition and progress. but it's also a life that leaves an indelible mark on history, shaping the narrative of a nation. The samurai legacy isn't just etched in the annals of war, it's threaded through the fabric of everyday life, from the armor you don to the rice you eat. So, as you lay your head down and the sounds of Edo drift into the night, remember this: being a samurai is about more than wielding a sword. It's about wielding influence, balancing duty with family, and finding harmony in the chaos of life. It's a journey as much about the heart as it is about the blade, and as you drift off to sleep, you're not just dreaming of glory on the battlefield, but of the quiet triumphs at home. Because in the end, that's the real measure of a samurai's strength, the ability to navigate both the myth and the reality of a life well lived. The sun peeks over the horizon, casting its first rays on your simple cell in the Abbey of Aachen, and you're already contemplating the day's grind. Monastic life in the 9th century isn't exactly a leisurely affair. If you thought being a monk meant lounging around in flowing robes, think again. The rule of St. Benedict is your daily drill sergeant, and it doesn't take kindly to slackers. Your day kicks off in the wee hours. Think pre-dawn, when even roosters are still dreaming. Matins, the first service of the day, is your alarm clock. Here's the kicker: no snooze button. You're up and at 'em, chanting psalms and getting your spiritual fix before most people have even contemplated their morning coffee. The idea was to keep your soul scrubbed clean and ready for salvation, but let's be honest, it's also about keeping you too busy to sin. After matins, it's time for a little Lectio Divina, sacred reading. This isn't your average book club. You're poring over Latin manuscripts, maybe a hefty volume by St. Augustine if you're lucky. You might even get your hands on a rare Greek text if you've been particularly virtuous. These sessions are supposed to nurture your spiritual growth, but they're also a mental workout. Forget Sudoku, this is the real brain gym. Now, let's talk about the economics of your abbey. You didn't think all this divine living was free, did you? The abbey's coffers are filled thanks to generous land grants from nobles who, quite frankly, wanted to hedge their bets with the Almighty. These land parcels, sometimes hundreds of acres, are the economic lifeline of monastic life. They're not just sitting pretty, they're bustling with activity. Picture fields of wheat swaying in the breeze, herds of cattle grazing lazily, and vineyards producing what you hope will be a decent vintage. Managing these estates is no small feat. You're part monk, part medieval estate manager. The practical implications? You've got to know your way around a plough as well as a psalter. You're overseeing serfs who till the land, shear the sheep, and bring in the harvest. It's a delicate balance. Keep the spiritual fires burning while ensuring the abbey's pantry remains stocked. Because let's face it, piety doesn't pay the bills, the rule of Saintson. Benedict might sound like a never-ending to-do list, but it's the glue holding this whole monastic endeavor together. It dictates everything from when you eat to when you sleep. There's a reason Benedict's rulebook became the medieval bestseller it was. You're eating 2 meals a day, and if you're lucky, you might get a sip of wine. Moderation is key, though, because nothing says holies like a good bit of self-denial. And let's not romanticize it. Life is tough. The abbey might be wealthy, but that doesn't mean you're living in luxury. You're wearing simple habits. No designer labels here, and your bed is more like a wooden slab with a thin layer of straw. Comfort is for the soul, not the body, apparently. By midday, you're deep into the work of the abbey. Physical labor is as much a part of your spiritual journey as those early morning chants. It's time to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty. Whether you're in the scriptorium copying manuscripts or out in the field stacking hay, this isn't a life of idle contemplation. It's a gritty, hands-on approach to holiness, and it's what keeps the abbey running like a well-oiled machine. This isn't just busy work, though. It serves a purpose beyond mere survival. The abbey is a hub of learning and culture, a beacon of stability in a world that's anything but. Remember, this is the 9th century. Viking raids, political intrigue, and social upheaval are the background noise of your life. In this context, the abbey stands as a fortress of faith and knowledge amid the chaos. You're not just a cog in the monastic machine, you're part of a grander narrative, a keeper of the flame during some pretty dark times. As the day winds down, you find yourself reflecting on what it means to be a monk in Charlemagne's world. The Carolingian Renaissance is in full swing, and you're smack dab in the middle of it. Aachen is the epicenter of this intellectual revival, and while you're not exactly hobnobbing with emperors, you're contributing to a legacy that will outlast kingdoms and conquerors. So, as the sun dips below the horizon and Compline, your final prayers of the day wraps up, you might consider the paradox of your life. You're cloistered away from the world, yet you're deeply connected to its rhythms and needs. By day's end, the quiet of your cell offers a moment of reflection, a chance to ponder the mysteries of faith and the practicalities of medieval life. Tomorrow, it all begins again. Same chance, different day. Ah, the life of a Carolingian monk. It's a paradox wrapped in a robe, isn't it? You're cut off from the outside world, but in tune with its intellectual pulse. As the morning sun climbs higher, your physical labor gives way to a different kind of toil, one that involves less dirt under your fingernails and more ink stains on your fingers. Welcome to the cerebral side of monastic life, where you trade plows for parchment. Now, let's dive into the brainy side of this operation, the Carolingian Renaissance. And no, this isn't a bunch of monks painting the Sistine Chapel. We're talking about a revival of classical learning that would make even a toga-clad Roman proud. Charlemagne, the big cheese of the Carolingian Empire, decided that a little enlightenment could go a long way in stabilizing his vast kingdom. Imagine being a monarch in the 9th century with your empire sprawling across Europe like an unruly toddler. You'd probably want subjects who can read and write too, not just grunt and swing a sword. Charlemagne's educational reforms weren't just about dusting off Aristotle and Plato for a bit of intellectual show and tell. Nope, this was a full-scale brain trust operation. The man was a visionary and knew that knowledge was power, literally. To back this up, he instituted schools in monasteries and cathedrals across the empire. He even brought in the big guns, like Alcuin of York, a scholar whose mind was as sharp as a newly forged sword. Alcuin's job? To whip Carolingian education into shape, ensuring the monks and clergy could do more than just chant psalms in Latin. Speaking of Latin, let's talk about the scriptorium, a buzzing medieval workspace that was the Google Docs of its time. Here, monks like you were tasked with copying and illuminating manuscripts. Parchment wasn't just lying around like a stack of post-its. Each sheaf was a masterpiece in the making. Illuminated manuscripts were the medieval Instagram posts designed to dazzle and educate. Richly adorned with gold leaf and vibrant pigments, these pages were less about going viral and more about preserving the wisdom of the ancients. But let's not get too starry-eyed. The reality was more ink-stained fingers and less creative freedom. Each book could take months, sometimes years, to complete. Why, you ask? First, there's the matter of parchment. Unlike today's paper, parchment is made from animal skin, preferably calf, known as vellum. Just think about the logistics. A standard Bible could take the hides of an entire herd. And let's not even get started on the ink. You don't just run down to the local stationery shop. Instead, you're concocting your own from oak galls, iron salts, and other delightful medieval recipes. And if you're imagining a cozy library to store these treasures, think again. Books in the 9th century were luxury items, the medieval equivalent of a Fabergé egg. They were chained to shelves to prevent them from wandering off. A bit of medieval security, if you will. Libraries weren't vast spaces lined with endless tomes. They were more like modest collections, carefully curated and zealously guarded. Each book was an investment, costing as much as a small farm. Lose one? You might as well have lost the abbey's prize cow. So why all the fuss? Why bother with this monumental effort? Because knowledge was the key to power and the stability of the kingdom. By fostering a learned clergy, Charlemagne hoped to create a unified, well-administered empire. The abbey wasn't just a place of prayer, it was an intellectual powerhouse, a repository of wisdom in a world teetering on the edge of darkness. The Carolingian Renaissance was about pulling Europe back from the brink, one meticulously copied manuscript at a time. As you sit there, quill in hand, consider the scope of your work. You're not just preserving words, you're safeguarding civilization's future. It's a heady responsibility, and one that requires the patience of a saint. Each stroke of the quill, each intricate illustration contributes to a cultural legacy that will endure for centuries. You're crafting a bridge to the future, one painstaking manuscript at a time. But let's not forget the practicalities. Running a scriptorium is not just about the intellectual high ground, it's also about managing a medieval production line. You're coordinating a team of scribes, illuminators, and binders, making sure each page is flawless. Any mistake is costly and, frankly, a bit of a nightmare to correct. There's no control blasé in the 9th century. And amidst all this, there's the hum of the abbey, the prayers, the chants, the rhythm of daily life. It's a reminder that your work, however cerebral, is still rooted in faith. The manuscripts are a testament not just to human knowledge, but also to divine inspiration. They're a bridge between the earthly and the ethereal, a tangible expression of the monastic devotion to both God and learning. As the day wears on and the sun begins its descent, you ponder the paradox of your existence once more. You're secluded behind stone walls, yet engaged in a dialogue with the great minds of history. You're crafting words that will echo through time, even as the world outside remains turbulent and unpredictable. It's a life both humble and grand, an intellectual adventure amidst the simplicity of monastic routine. So, as you lay down your quill and close another chapter of this ongoing saga, remember that the world may spin on its chaotic axis, but within these walls, you're part of a legacy that transcends the temporal. The work is far from over, and tomorrow the scriptorium awaits once more, ready to transform the mundane into the magnificent. The Carolingian Renaissance isn't just a revival of learning, it's a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit. As you lay down your quill and another chapter is closed, your stomach starts to rumble. A not-so-subtle reminder that the cerebral gymnastics of manuscript copying aren't exactly calorie-free. It's midday, and that means one thing. Time for the communal meal, a humbling feast of boiled legumes and bread that's more about sustenance than satisfaction. But hey, it beats fasting. Welcome to the culinary delights of the 9th century abbey, where the menu is as predictable as the sunrise. Gathered around a long wooden table in the refectory, you and your fellow monks partake in the grand tradition of monastic dining. Let's get one thing straight. This isn't a medieval version of a Michelin-starred restaurant. Forget exotic spices or decadent desserts. Your meal is all about the basics. Today's special? Lentil soup paired with yesterday's bread. No need for a sommelier here. Your beverage is a straightforward ale or perhaps a diluted wine, if you're lucky. While the food might not win any culinary awards, the meal is about more than just filling your belly. It's a time of reflection, a chance to ponder the finer points of moderation. Remember, the rule of St. Benedict didn't just dictate your prayer schedule, it extended to your plate as well. Moderation in all things, even when the all things are as basic as boiled beans. But let's talk about the social hierarchy at play here. Don't let the egalitarian robes fool you. Monastic life is steeped in its own brand of politics. You see, not all monks are created equal. At the head of the table sits the abbot, the grand poobah of the abbey whose word is law. Think of him as the CEO of this spiritual corporation, managing everything from spiritual guidance to estate oversight. His status isn't just symbolic, it's a reflection of the abbey's internal hierarchy. Then there are the senior monks, seasoned veterans of the cloistered life who've earned their stripes through years of devotion and service. They're the middle management, overseeing the day-to-day operations of the abbey and ensuring the rule is followed to the letter. You, on the other hand, might be a novice or junior monk, still learning the ropes and finding your place in the spiritual pecking order. It's a nuanced dance of hierarchy and humility, where obedience is as valuable as wisdom. While you chew thoughtfully on your bread, consider the broader role of monasteries like yours. Sure, they're spiritual sanctuaries and centres of learning, but they're also economic powerhouses. Think of the abbey as a medieval conglomerate, with its fingers in various pies, agriculture, education, and even politics. Land is the currency of choice, and the abbey owns plenty of it, thanks to generous donations from nobles hoping to secure their spot in the afterlife. Real estate might just be the holiest of investments. The abbey's lands are tended by serfs and tenant farmers who work tirelessly to keep the coffers full and the granaries stocked. And let's not forget the abbey's role as a community hub. It's not just a place of prayer, it's a centre of local administration, a medieval DMV of sorts, where disputes are settled and records are kept. Why does all this matter? Because an abbey's influence extends far beyond its walls. It's a beacon of stability in a world fraught with uncertainty, a steady hand in the midst of chaos. Monasteries are the medieval equivalent of think tanks, shaping the intellectual and spiritual landscape of their time. They're also political players, wielding influence in court and council chambers across the land. And it's not just about power for power's sake. The abbey's economic clout allows it to fund charitable works, providing for the poor and needy in the surrounding community. In a time when social safety nets are more myth than reality, the monastery fills the gap, offering a glimpse of hope in a harsh world. As you finish your meal and prepare to return to your duties, ponder the paradox of monastic life once more. You're part of a spiritual community that transcends worldly concerns, yet deeply intertwined with the economic and political machinations of the day. It's a delicate balance, one that requires constant vigilance and reflection. So, as you rise from the table and head back to your scriptorium or fields, remember that you're not just a monk in a cloister, you're a player in a complex game of faith, politics, and economics. The work is never-ending, and the stakes are high. But within these walls, amid the chants and prayers, you're contributing to a legacy that will endure long after the last candle is extinguished. Tomorrow, the cycle begins anew, and the abbey's rhythm continues, a timeless dance of devotion and duty. As you rise from the table, the afternoon sun casts long shadows, and it's time to swap your monkish ruminations for a more hands-on approach to holiness. Spoiler alert, this involves a lot more dirt and sweat than you'd find in a Sunday sermon. Welcome to the agrarian life, where the fields are calling and the plough waits for no monk. Let's get one thing straight. Monastic life in the Carolingian Empire wasn't all about chanting and quill pushing. Nope. The abbey was also an agrarian powerhouse, with land holdings that would make a modern real estate mogul green with envy. Picture hundreds, sometimes thousands, of acres of fertile land at your disposal. This isn't just a quaint garden patch. It's an enterprise that could rival any contemporary farming operation. Now, why all the fuss about farming? Simple, self-sufficiency. The abbey couldn't just pop down to the medieval equivalent of Whole Foods. If you wanted bread on the table and ale in your cup, you had to roll up your sleeves and get cultivating. The fields are your lifeline, and the monks are the labour force powering this agricultural machine. It's a full-on team effort, with each monk playing a part in this divine version of Farmville. But hold your horses. This isn't just subsistence farming. The Carolingian Empire, under Charlemagne's grand vision, was heavily reliant on these monastic agricultural outputs. The abbeys were the backbone of the empire's economy, producing not only food, but also critical cash crops like flax and hops. This wasn't just about keeping the monks fed. It was about supporting a burgeoning empire with a healthy appetite for expansion. And speaking of expansion, let's talk numbers. A typical monastic farm could include hundreds of serfs working under the direction of the monks, tilling the land, sowing seeds, and harvesting crops. These aren't just any fields, they're meticulously organized, with crop rotation systems that would make modern permaculture enthusiasts nod in approval. It's not organic, but it's as sustainable as 9th century agriculture gets. For a more specific picture, consider this. A single abbey might control over 1,000 serfs, working across several hundred acres. That's a lot of hands, a lot of land, and a whole lot of wheat. These aren't just numbers. They're the backbone of an economy that supported not only the abbey, but also the surrounding community. The surplus produce was often traded, bolstering the local economy and ensuring the abbey's coffers remained full. But here's the kicker. While the monks are knee-deep in the soil, they're also fulfilling a spiritual mandate. The rule of St. Sainton, Benedict, was pretty clear. Idleness is the enemy of the soul. So, while your body is busy breaking a sweat, your mind is supposed to be contemplating loftier things. It's a curious blend of the earthly and the ethereal, a dance between the sacred and the mundane. Yet, let's not romanticize things too much. Monastic agriculture wasn't all about divine duty. There were some decidedly less than holy motivations at play. You see, the abbey wasn't just a spiritual haven, it was a political player, and land was the currency of power. The more land you controlled, the more influence you wielded. So, while you're out there sowing seeds, you're also sowing the seeds of political clout. And let's debunk a myth while we're at it. The image of monks as simple, humble tillers of the earth is only partly true. Sure, you're working the fields, but don't forget the managerial aspect. The monks were essentially the CEOs of these medieval agribusinesses. They oversaw the serfs, managed the crop yields, and ensured the abbey's agricultural operations ran smoothly. This wasn't just farming, it was agrarian entrepreneurship. As the sun dips lower, casting a golden hue over the fields, you take a moment to reflect on the bigger picture. The abbey's vast agricultural enterprise isn't just a means of survival, it's a testament to the Carolingian Empire's reliance on monastic productivity. It's about creating stability in a world where chaos was more common than calm. The fields are not just fertile ground for crops, but also for the seeds of economic and political stability. And amidst all this, there's still the rhythm of prayer. The afternoon hours are punctuated by moments of spiritual reflection, a reminder that beneath the sweat and toil lies a deeper purpose. The chants and prayers are a constant thread in the tapestry of monastic life, weaving the mundane with the divine. It's a delicate balance, maintaining the spiritual and the secular, ensuring that each step in the furrow is also a step towards salvation. As you wrap up your work in the fields and head back to the abbey, consider the paradox once more. You're part of a monastic world that thrives on simplicity, yet is deeply entwined with the complexities of politics and economics. The abbey is a microcosm of the Carolingian Empire, a place where faith meets function and devotion drives productivity. So, as the sun sets and you prepare for the evening's prayers, remember that you're not just a monk, you're a pivotal player in a grander scheme. You're part of a legacy that stretches beyond the cloister walls, a testament to the enduring power of faith, hard work, and the human spirit. And as you drift off to sleep, the rhythm of the abbey continues, a timeless dance of devotion and duty, a reminder that tomorrow, the fields and the prayers await anew. As the last rays of the sun retreat, casting a dim glow over the abbey's stone walls, you find yourself drawn to the chapel for Vespers, tonight's soundtrack to your monastic routine. The evening prayer isn't just about ticking off another box on the heavenly to-do list. It's a time to unwind the mind, like a spiritual yoga session for the soul. And let's face it, after a day of juggling piety and pragmatism, you could use a moment of zen. But before you get too caught up in the incense-scented serenity, let's talk about the abbey's dual identity. It's a place where prayer meets pragmatism, and you're not just a monk, you're part of an economic engine that powers a chunk of 9th century Europe. The abbey is the medieval equivalent of a Fortune 500 company, and you're the unseen force keeping the wheels turning. Remember, it's not just divine intervention filling those coffers, it's the hard work of hundreds of serfs, the meticulous management of sprawling estates, and the shrewd negotiation skills of your abbot. And yet, amidst the chants and the divine whispers, you can't help but ponder Charlemagne's grand vision. The man wasn't just a king, he was the Steve Jobs of medieval Europe, orchestrating an intellectual renaissance that left a legacy as enduring as the iPhone. But here's the kicker. While the Carolingian Renaissance is often romanticized as a golden age of learning, the reality was a bit less dazzling. It was more about practicality than poetry, with a focus on administrative efficiency and creating a literate clergy that could manage the empire's bureaucratic demands. Sure, there were glimmers of cultural brilliance. You've got Alcuin of York and his educational reforms, monasteries bustling with scholarly activity, and manuscripts that were the medieval version of viral content. But the myth of a widespread cultural renaissance is just that, a myth. The literacy rate among the general population was still as low as a medieval limbo bar, and those illuminated manuscripts weren't exactly flying off the shelves. They were luxury items, locked up tighter than a dragon's hoard. As you stand in the chapel, the echoes of chanting filling the space, it's hard not to reflect on the paradox of your existence. You're living in a world where faith and practicality are intertwined, where every decision is a dance between spiritual duty and economic necessity. It's a balancing act that would make a tightrope walker break out in a cold sweat. And speaking of balance, Charlemagne's empire was a precarious one. The Carolingian Renaissance might have been a beacon of hope, but it was also a response to a world teetering on the edge of chaos. Viking raids, internal strife, and political fragmentation were the background noise to this grand experiment. The abbey, with its dual role as a religious haven and economic powerhouse, was a stabilizing force in an unstable world. So what does all this mean for you, the humble monk, as you prepare to retire for the night? It's a reminder that the lessons of the past are as relevant today as they were a millennium ago. In a world where spirituality and practicality still weave a complex tapestry, the monastic life offers a lens through which to view our own struggles. Whether it's balancing work and faith, or navigating the ever-shifting landscape of economic and political power, the challenges remain strikingly similar. As you settle into your simple wooden bed, the straw mattress hardly a match for modern memory foam, you can't help but marvel at the legacy you're part of. The Carolingian monks weren't just preserving the past, they were shaping the future, laying the groundwork for a world that would eventually emerge from the shadows of the Dark Ages. The manuscripts you labour over, the fields you tend, and the prayers you chant are all threads in a tapestry that stretches far beyond the walls of Aachen. And here's a thought to drift off to sleep with: the notion that you're part of something greater, a legacy that transcends time and space. It's a comforting thought, even as the world outside remains as unpredictable as a medieval weather forecast. Tomorrow the sun will rise, the vespers will beckon once more, and the rhythm of the abbey will continue. A timeless dance of devotion and duty, a reminder that history is not just a record of what was, but a living testament to what can be. The sun rises over Istanbul, casting its golden glow on the bustling city, and you're already dressed in your finest kaftan, ready to step into the labyrinthine world of Topkapi Palace. You, a courtier in the service of the Sultan, are about to navigate the ornate halls of power, where allegiances are forged and fortunes are made or lost in the blink of an eye. The morning rituals at the palace are a spectacle of grandeur, a daily reminder that you're part of an empire straddling 3 continents, and with it comes the weight of responsibility. Your morning begins not with a leisurely breakfast, but with a series of carefully orchestrated rituals. The first order of business? The ceremonial coffee. Yes, coffee, the lifeblood of the Ottoman court. Forget your modern-day Starbucks, this is serious business. The preparation and serving of coffee are laden with ritualistic precision, a performance that has been perfected over countless mornings. This is where you get your first taste of the day's political climate, as rumours swirl like the steam rising from your cup. As a courtier, the hierarchy is both your ladder and your leash. You're somewhere in the middle, a cog in the vast imperial machine, but don't underestimate the power of a well-placed cog. The palace is a microcosm of the empire, where each role is meticulously defined, yet the boundaries are as fluid as the Bosphorus. Your duties are a delicate dance of diplomacy, administration, and survival, ensuring you remain in the good graces of your patrons. Speaking of patrons, let's talk numbers. The palace's upkeep alone devours an eye-watering 40,000 coins each month. That's not just for gilded tiles and luxurious fabrics. It's the cost of sustaining an entire ecosystem, from the lowest servant to the highest vizier. This is an empire where the economy isn't just about money, it's about power and influence. Understanding this is crucial, because in the Ottoman court, alliances are your currency, and loyalty is the most valuable coin of all. Mornings at Topkapi are filled with whispered conversations and sidelong glances as you and your fellow courtiers navigate the ever-shifting sands of palace politics. Patronage is everything, and every conversation is a potential transaction. Your position hinges on these relationships, the unspoken agreements that can elevate or ruin you. The political landscape is as treacherous as it is fascinating. The Sultan's court is a crucible of ambition, where every move is calculated, every word measured. The Grand Vizier, the Sultan's right-hand man, is the power behind the throne, but even he is not immune to the intrigues that pulse through these halls. As you make your way through the palace, you must be acutely aware of who holds the power today and who might hold it tomorrow. But let's not romanticize this world too much. Sure, the stories of intrigue and opulence are alluring, but life as a courtier is no fairy tale. The stakes are high, and the price of failure can be steep. The court is a place where fortunes can be made overnight, but just as quickly, a misstep can lead to exile, or worse. While the grand architecture of Topkapi Palace might suggest a world of stability and permanence, the reality is anything but. This is a place where the past and future collide daily, where tradition and innovation coexist in a delicate balance. The palace is a living, breathing entity, its corridors echoing with the footsteps of those who came before and those who will follow. As you weave through the morning's activities, you can't help but reflect on the vast empire you serve. From the bustling markets of Istanbul to the far-flung provinces of North Africa and Eastern Europe, the Ottoman Empire is a sprawling mosaic of cultures, languages, and peoples. The court is a reflection of this diversity, a melting pot where ideas and influences converge, and as a courtier, you are at the center of this vibrant tapestry. The economic underpinnings of your role are as complex as the court itself. Beyond the immediate duties and politics, there's a broader context to consider. The empire's wealth is built on trade, taxation, and conquest. But maintaining this vast domain requires more than just resources. It demands strategy, diplomacy, and the ability to adapt in a rapidly changing world. As the morning unfolds, you find yourself contemplating the intricate dance of patronage and loyalty that defines your existence. Loyalty in the Ottoman court is a fickle thing, often more about expediency than genuine allegiance. Yet, it's the glue that holds the court together, a web of relationships that can be both fragile and unbreakable. The morning haze begins to lift, both literally and figuratively, as you prepare to face the day's challenges. The Sultan himself is a distant figure, yet his presence is felt in every corner of the palace. His decisions ripple through the court, affecting everyone from the Grand Vizier to the humblest servant. The Sultan's favor is the ultimate prize, a golden ticket in a world where fortunes can turn on a dime. As you prepare for your next task, you can't help but marvel at the complex machinery of the Ottoman court. It's a world where history is made in the corridors of power, where every decision has the potential to shape the destiny of an empire. And as a courtier, you are both a participant and a witness to this unfolding drama, a player in a game that has been going on for centuries. With the morning rituals behind you, there's a sense of anticipation in the air. The day is still young, and the possibilities are endless. As you step into the next phase of your duties, you carry with you the weight of history, the knowledge that every action, every word, is part of a larger story, a story that you, as a courtier, are helping to write. As the sun continues its ascent, casting long shadows that play tricks on the intricate mosaic tiles of Topkapi Palace, the real work begins. Your task? To navigate the treacherous waters of Ottoman diplomacy. A complex ballet where every gesture is scrutinized, every word weighed like gold. You're not just a messenger, you're a diplomat in miniature, entrusted with the Sultan's messages, the whispered secrets that hold the empire's future in their folds. Now, let's not romanticize this too much. Sure, you're part of a centuries-old tradition of diplomacy that makes today's political machinations look like child's play. But let's get real, this is no stroll through the tulip gardens. You're stepping into a high-stakes game of geopolitical chess where the players aren't just your fellow courtiers, but heavyweights like the Habsburgs, the Russians, and the French. The Ottoman Empire is the board, and boy is it ever complicated. Take the Treaty of Karlowitz, for instance, a real page-turner from 1699. Picture this. The Ottomans, after a century of mostly successful expansion, face a coalition of European powers who'd finally decided they'd had enough of the empire's territorial shopping spree. The treaty marked the end of the Great Turkish War, a conflict that saw an impressive lineup of European states, including Austria, Poland and Venice, join forces. It's like the Avengers, but with more powdered wigs and fewer CGI effects. The Treaty of Karlowitz is significant for several reasons, not least because it forced the empire to cede territories like Hungary and Transylvania to the Habsburgs. This wasn't just a diplomatic defeat, it was a seismic shift in the balance of power. In the blink of an eye, the empire's influence in Europe took a hit, and the Sultan's court had to rethink its entire approach to foreign policy. Talk about a bad day at the office. And where do you fit into this mosaic of power and politics? You're the guy who carries these delicate communiques, ensuring the Sultan's voice reaches his allies and adversaries alike. It's not just about having a good memory or a flair for languages, though both help. It's about understanding the subtleties of the message, the nuance behind the words. A misplaced comma or a misinterpreted phrase could mean the difference between peace and war. No pressure, right? But let's not ignore the allure of this world. The romantic image of a courtier as an enigmatic figure, weaving through the corridors of power with a silken tongue and a mind sharp as a dagger, holds a certain appeal. And it's not entirely unfounded. Ottoman courtiers were indeed the glue holding the empire's vast and varied territories together. They were the ones brokering deals, smoothing ruffled feathers, and occasionally, let's be honest, stirring the pot when it suited them. The economic context here is vital. The Ottoman Empire wasn't just a political entity, It was an economic powerhouse, strategically located at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa. Control of trade routes meant wealth, and wealth meant power. The empire's ability to levy taxes and tariffs on the goods flowing through its lands was a key component of its economic strategy. But maintaining this delicate balance required constant negotiation and diplomacy. And that's where you come in. You're not just delivering messages, you're gathering intelligence. Each meeting, each exchange is a chance to glean information that could be critical to the empire's interests. Who's plotting against whom? Which alliances are fraying? It's like playing 4D chess, but with actual lives and territories at stake. But let's debunk a popular myth while we're at it. The idea that the Ottoman court was a monolith, united in purpose and action, is as fanciful as a fairy tale. In reality, it was a hotbed of competing interests and shifting alliances, much like a modern-day board meeting, but with more embroidery. The Grand Vizier might have been the Sultan's top advisor, but he had his own agenda, and so did everyone else. The court was a living, breathing entity, its machinations as unpredictable as the Bosphorus currents. As you prepare to deliver your next missive, you can't help but marvel at the strategic importance of your role. The Ottoman Empire in 699 was a formidable force, but the cracks were beginning to show. The European states were no longer just on the defensive, they were playing offense, and you were in the thick of it, a player in a game that was constantly evolving. But don't get too comfortable in your role as the Sultan's mouthpiece. The court is a place where fortunes can turn faster than you can say, Janissary. One day you're the trusted envoy, the next you're out on your ear, depending on which way the political winds are blowing. It's a reminder that in the Ottoman court, as in life, nothing is permanent except the uncertainty. So, as you step out into the midday sun, letters tucked carefully into your robes, you carry with you the weight of an empire. The messages you deliver are more than words on parchment. They are the threads that weave together the complex tapestry of Ottoman diplomacy. And as you navigate this world of intrigue and ambition, you are reminded of the simple truth that has guided courtiers for centuries. In the game of power, it's not just about winning, it's about surviving to play another day. As you clutch those precious letters, the midday sun casting its relentless glare, you make your way to the divan, essentially the Ottoman Empire's version of a board meeting, but with more turbans and less PowerPoint. It's an afternoon rendezvous where the Empire's heavyweights gather to hash out everything from military campaigns to how much to tax the sheep farmers in Anatolia. And trust me, in a world where the wrong decision could mean losing a province or two, these meetings are anything but a casual chinwag. Now, let's bust a myth right off the bat. The divan wasn't just some rubber stamp for the Sultan's whims. Oh no, this was a place where serious power was wielded, often by the Grand Vizier, the Sultan's right-hand man. Think of him as the CEO who runs the empire, while the Sultan plays the role of a very well-dressed chairman. And yes, the Sultan did pop in occasionally, but he wasn't exactly micromanaging the budget line by line. The Grand Vizier, often the most feared man in the room, wasn't just a yes-man. He wielded considerable independence, particularly when the Sultan was more interested in his harem than governance. This guy was the puppet master, pulling strings with the finesse of a maestro conducting a symphony of political intrigue. He had the power to execute laws, lead military expeditions, and even appoint or dismiss other pashas. Talk about having the keys to the kingdom, or at least to the kingdom's Ferrari. The divan itself was a well-oiled machine, a bureaucratic marvel of its time. Picture a room filled with men in lavish robes, each representing the vast array of territories under Ottoman control. From the Balkans to the Arabian Peninsula, everyone had a seat at this sprawling table, metaphorically speaking. This was a place where decisions weren't just made, they were forged in the fires of debate, negotiation, and yes, the occasional shouting match. But let's not get carried away romanticizing this gathering of wise men. The divan was as much about personal vendettas as it was about statecraft. Each member had their own agenda, their own patrons to appease. The lines between personal and political were as blurry as the Bosphorus on a foggy morning. It was a game of chess played with human lives, and the stakes were higher than the minarets of the Blue Mosque. And speaking of stakes, let's dive into some kanuname, the Ottoman legal codes that were the backbone of this bureaucratic behemoth. These weren't just arbitrary rules scribbled on papyrus. They were meticulously crafted laws covering everything from criminal justice to land tenure. The Kanunami were the empire's legal backbone, ensuring a semblance of order in a realm that spanned 3 continents. In the Kanuname, you'd find gems like the tax rate for silk merchants in Bursa or the penalties for smuggling. Fascinating stuff if you're into the nitty-gritty of governance. This wasn't just about maintaining order, it was about ensuring the empire's coffers were as full as a merchant's cargo hold. After all, you can't run an empire on empty pockets, and those fancy palaces and military campaigns don't pay for themselves. Now, let's sprinkle in a bit of palace intrigue. The Divan was a stage where alliances were forged and broken faster than you could say Janissary revolt. The Grand Vizier might have been the star, but supporting actors were always jostling for a bigger role. Everyone had an angle, a secret, a dagger hidden beneath their robe. It was a place where whispers carried more weight than official decrees, and where who you knew was as important as what you knew. Economic context is crucial here. The Ottoman Empire wasn't just a political juggernaut, it was an economic colossus. Trade routes crisscrossed its territories like veins in a body, pumping wealth and resources into the heart of the empire. The Divan's decisions weren't just about maintaining power, they were about ensuring that wealth continued to flow, that the empire remained the bustling hub of commerce it had always been. And then there's the myth of Ottoman governance as a monolithic, unchanging entity. In reality, it was as dynamic and adaptive as the markets of Istanbul. The Divan evolved over time, reflecting the changing needs of the empire. The decisions made here were a balancing act between tradition and innovation, between maintaining control and allowing flexibility. This wasn't just governance, it was an art form, a masterclass in statecraft that would make Machiavelli nod in approval. So, as you sit in this gathering of power and ambition, you can't help but feel the weight of history pressing down on you. The Divan is more than just a meeting, it's a microcosm of the empire itself, a place where the past, present and future collide in a spectacle of political theatre. Each decision made here reverberates throughout the empire, shaping its destiny, for better or worse. And as the day wears on, you realize that in this world of high-stakes politics and shifting allegiances, nothing is ever set in stone. The Divan might be a place of power, but it's also a reminder of the impermanence of that power. Empires rise and fall, just as sultans come and go. But for now, you're in the thick of it, a participant in a grand drama that's been unfolding for centuries. So, keep your wits about you, because in the Ottoman court, the only constant is change. The Divan may seem like a bastion of stability, but beneath its surface, the currents of intrigue and ambition swirl with relentless intensity. And as you navigate these treacherous waters, remember, in the game of empire, survival is the ultimate victory. And as you inhale the intoxicating aroma of spiced meats wafting through the palace corridors, you realize the day isn't quite done with you yet. Ah, the evening banquet, where diplomacy meets decadence, and the only thing more abundant than the food is the intrigue. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the harem. The Western imagination has long been obsessed with the Sultan's harem, spinning tales of an exotic paradise filled with languorous beauties lounging on silk cushions. But sorry to burst that bubble, Casanova. The harem was less of a hedonistic haven and more of a political powerhouse. Think of it as a school for the empire's future mothers, wives, and even regents, wielding influence behind the veiled partitions. These women were savvy players in the court's Game of Thrones, not just decorative extras in the Sultan's daydream, but back to the banquet at hand. This isn't your average dinner party, no sir. We're talking enough food to feed not just a village, but possibly a small town. Imagine the logistical acrobatics involved in preparing a feast for an empire. Let's talk numbers. The palace kitchen staff alone boasted over 1,000 workers. And they weren't just turning out kebabs and baklava for the Sultan and his court. Oh no, their culinary creations fed everyone from the janitors to the janissaries. And the costs? Astronomical, even by today's standards. The palace budget allocated a hefty chunk of its 40,000 coins a month just to ensure everyone had their fill. That's a lot of dough, pun intended, for a spread that included everything from roasted lamb to stuffed grape leaves, with a side of opulence. Now, if you think getting a pizza delivered in rush hour is tricky, try coordinating the arrival of goods from 3 different continents. The Ottoman Empire was a culinary crossroads, and its banquets were a veritable United Nations of cuisine. Spices from India, coffee from Yemen, and sugar from Egypt all found their way into the palace kitchens thanks to a trade network that would make Amazon blush. The Silk Road might as well have been called the Spice Express, ferrying cinnamon, cardamom and saffron like they were going out of style. But let's dig deeper than the bottom of a copper pot. These feasts weren't just about indulgence. They were a form of cultural diplomacy. Each dish told a story of conquest, trade, or alliance. Sharing a meal was a way to solidify bonds, to demonstrate wealth and power without firing a single cannonball. It was a culinary chess match where every course was a move designed to impress or intimidate. And speaking of chess, let's not forget the players at this table. The Sultan might be the host, but the guest list reads like a who's who of Ottoman politics. The Grand Vizier, Pashas, and foreign dignitaries all rub shoulders, each with their own agenda simmering beneath the surface. In this world, the clink of goblets is as much about alliances as it is about toasts. But here's the twist. While the Western world was obsessing over the Sultan's supposed indulgence, the real action was in the exchange of ideas and culture. The Ottoman Empire was a melting pot long before it became a culinary cliché. This was a place where Persian poets, Arab mathematicians, and European engineers mingled, sharing insights over shared meals. And the food itself? A testament to the empire's diversity. From the delicate pastries of the Balkans to the rich stews of Anatolia, each dish was a reflection of the regions under Ottoman control. The culinary landscape was as vast and varied as the empire itself, a delicious mosaic that transcended borders. But don't be fooled by the sumptuous surroundings. Beneath the surface, the banquet was a battlefield of its own, where the cutlery was as sharp as the wit, and the stakes were as high as the minarets of Hagia Sophia. Every gesture, every glance, was part of a larger game, a dance of diplomacy where survival often depended on one's ability to read the room. And as you savour the last bite of the syrup-soaked baklava, you're reminded of the delicate balance that defines the Ottoman court. Beneath the veneer of luxury lies a world of ambition and intrigue, a reminder that in the empire, as in life, appearances can be deceiving. As the evening wears on, the palace is bathed in the soft glow of oil lamps, their flickering light casting dancing shadows on the ornately tiled walls. The feast may be over, but the night is still young, and the conversations continue, a symphony of languages and dialects mingling in the warm night air. The banquet was more than a meal, it was a microcosm of the empire itself, a reminder that the Ottoman court was as much about cultural exchange as it was about political power. And as you retire for the evening, stomach full and mind buzzing with the day's events, you realize that in this world of shifting alliances and ever-present intrigue, the only certainty is that tomorrow will bring a new set of challenges, and perhaps another feast to savor. As the last echoes of laughter fade into the night, you're left alone with your thoughts, reflecting on the whirlwind of a day that's been nothing short of an Ottoman roller coaster. It's hard not to feel a sense of awe and exhaustion, knowing that you've just spent a day woven into the very fabric of an empire that stretched its influence across 3 continents, a tapestry more intricate than the finest Persian rug. And let's be honest, those are pretty intricate. You, the courtier, are a single thread in this vast, colourful tapestry, but oh, what a thread! Your role is nuanced, a blend of diplomacy, espionage, and occasionally glorified message delivery. In the grand scheme of things, you're not just a messenger scuttling through corridors, but a key player in the empire's power dynamics. Forget the romantic notion that courtiers were just decorative appendages to the Sultan's whims. The truth is far more compelling. Your life is a balancing act, a high-wire performance without a safety net. Each day involves crafting alliances that, while fleeting, are necessary to keep the wheels of the empire turning. You're like the social media influencer of your time, only your feed is full of political alliances instead of avocado toast. And while the likes you chase are of a different variety, the stakes couldn't be higher. But let's not get too misty-eyed about your role. The Ottoman court, as you've seen, is no fairy tale. It's a world where a misstep can lead to a swift fall from grace. The feathers you ruffle today could very well be the ones that peck at you tomorrow. It's a dog-eat-dog world, or perhaps more aptly, a janissary, eat janissary one. Speaking of reality checks, Let's dive into the broader impact of this court on the modern world. The Ottoman court was not merely a backdrop for exotic tales of yore, it was a crucible for ideas and policies that ripple through history even today. The empire's grasp extended from the gates of Vienna to the sands of Egypt, impacting cultures, economies, and even religions along the way. The cultural fusion that happened here was not just a happy accident, it was a deliberate strategy. Take, for instance, the architectural marvels that dot the Ottoman landscape. The Topkapi Palace itself, with its sprawling courtyards and lavish decorations, serves as a testament to the empire's prosperity and artistic ambition. These structures were more than just eye candy, they were statements of power and sophistication. Today, they stand as UNESCO World Heritage Sites, drawing tourists and history buffs alike. The Ottomans knew how to build a legacy, and not just in stone and mortar. Trade was another feather in the Ottoman cap. With Istanbul as the beating heart of a trade network that spanned continents, the empire was a bustling hub of commerce. Goods flowed freely through its lands, and with them ideas and innovations. This exchange laid the groundwork for our modern global economy. The empire's control of key trade routes was akin to owning the world's most lucrative toll booths. It wasn't just about collecting tariffs, it was about controlling the flow of the world's riches. Today's globalized market owes much to the pathways first forged by Ottoman merchants. But let's not ignore the darker side of this history. The Ottoman system was also a machine of conquest and control. The Janissaries, once the empire's elite military force, were both revered and feared. While they were pivotal in expanding the empire's borders, they were also a reminder of the military might that kept far-flung territories in line. It's a stark reminder that empire building is rarely a gentle affair, and what of the harem, the oft misunderstood symbol of Ottoman decadence? Far from the exotic fantasy of Western imagination, it was, in reality, a political institution. The women of the harem wielded influence, shaping policies and even the succession of sultans. It was a realm of power plays and strategic marriages, a far cry from the silken paradise it's often painted to be. The harem was a microcosm of the court itself, a reminder that power in the Ottoman Empire was as much about who you knew as what you knew. As you ponder these reflections, you realize that the legacy of the Ottoman court is as complex as the empire it served. The blend of romance and reality, of legend and harsh truths, creates a picture that is both alluring and sobering. The court was a place where the past and future intertwined, where tradition met innovation in a dance that echoed across the centuries. The lessons of the Ottoman court resonate even today, offering insights into the nature of power, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. The empire may have crumbled, but its impact is indelible, etched into the annals of history like the calligraphy adorning the walls of its grand mosques. And as you prepare to retire for the night, it dawns on you that your day as a courtier, while exhausting, has given you a unique vantage point on history. You've witnessed the blend of romance and reality that defines the Ottoman court, a world where the stakes are as high as the ambitions that drive it. You've seen the grandeur and the grit, the beauty and the brutality, the legend and the truth. In the end, the life of an Ottoman courtier is a testament to the enduring human spirit, a reminder that amid the intrigue and ambition, the power struggles and the politics, there exists a thread of continuity that binds us all. It's a story not just of an empire, but of the people who lived and breathed within it, shaping its destiny and, in turn, the world's. As your head hits the pillow, the palace quiet and the city of Istanbul settling into sleep, you carry with you a deeper understanding of this historical era. The Ottoman court was more than a chapter in history. It was a world unto itself, a vibrant tapestry woven with the threads of countless lives and legacies. And who knows? Perhaps tomorrow will bring another chapter in this grand story, another chance to walk the corridors of power and witness history in the making. Until then, you rest easy, knowing you've been part of something truly extraordinary, a slice of history as rich and varied as the empire itself.